I spent 5 years volunteering as a teacher in Shaanxi, unaware that those sitting before me were actually the entire family of Qin Shi Huang. I merely posed a simple historical question, yet it caused them all to tremble in fear and prostrate themselves upon the ground. This was all because I had transmigrated directly into the presence of Qin Shi Huang. Just 3 days prior, Qin Shi Huang was sailing on a lake with Meng Tian when a sudden flash of white light erupted. I appeared from 3 meters above, plummeting directly onto their vessel. Qin Shi Huang took this as a divine omen from the heavens. He honored me with the title of Sage Master. After dispatching his troops to seal off all information regarding the event, he spoke with me and discovered that, despite my blindness, I possessed profound knowledge and diverse talents, with learning that even surpassed that of the Chancellor, Li Si. He surmised that if I were not an immortal, I was surely a grand genius. Upon learning during our conversation that I was a teacher, he immediately implored me to remain and educate his people. I had originally intended to volunteer in Shaanxi, but after a car accident threw me into the river, I awoke to find my vision gone. I asked no further questions and readily agreed, though none of them knew the truth. In reality, I was a traveler from the 21st century who had transmigrated to the Qin Dynasty, a fact I myself was unaware of at the time. After I was taken to Mount Anji, Qin Shi Huang immediately ordered a school to be built in secrecy. Curious to know what I would teach, he came to listen to my lecture. Yet, he could never have expected that the moment he entered, he would hear me utter such a treasonous question. Students, does anyone here know the cause of Qin Shi Huang's death? An immediate heavy silence fell over the classroom. After waiting a moment and receiving no answer, I decided to reveal the truth myself. Does no one know? Let me tell you. One of the 3 primary causes of Qin Shi Huang's death was poisoning from the immortal elixirs refined by Xu Fu. How could an immortal elixir be so highly toxic? Are you surprised, students? A great emperor meeting such an end. The very thought was audacious and absurd. Shi Huang is currently 42 years old, in the prime of his life, and having exhausted the nation's strength to seek the elixir, he should be destined for eternal life. How could the elixir possibly be poisonous? At this moment, Meng Tian, standing behind Qin Shi Huang, immediately drew his sword. With a single command from the emperor, he was prepared to strike. Wait, Qin Shi Huang suddenly signaled for Meng Tian to halt. The man suddenly recalled my appearance. If I were truly an immortal, then this might all be true. Sir, if the elixir refined by Xu Fu is highly toxic, why did Qin Shi Huang not die immediately? Furthermore, Qin Shi Huang is the emperor. Would he not have had someone test the poison before consuming it? His voice was not loud, yet it carried such authority that no one present dared to breathe. The emperor's elixirs had already been tested by others. For him to dare claim they were poisonous now, was this not a crime against the sovereign? The princes wore expressions of tension and anxiety, fearing that a great disaster was imminent, as they had grown quite fond of this teacher of mine. I replied to Qin Shi Huang, "You are a man of the 21st century now. Do you not understand the concept of chronic poisoning? That elixir was concocted from cinnabar, which is known to everyone as mercury. Qin Shi Huang's mistake lay in the very act of using test subjects. The human body is large. The toxicity of mercury does not manifest immediately. However, had he used a few rabbits for testing, I guarantee that every one of them would have perished. So mercury causes chronic poisoning? What audacity! Xu Fu dared to feed mercury to the emperor. Did he not fear the extermination of his entire clan or being torn apart by chariots? Do you truly possess so little understanding of history? After poisoning Qin Shi Huang for years, Xu Fu retreated unscathed, fleeing overseas to live a life of comfort and leisure. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang was so shaken that he nearly lost his footing. Ordinary men who wish to harm me shall surely be torn to pieces. The kings of the 6 states who wished to destroy me were crushed to dust. Yet Xu Fu fed me poison for years. Not only was he not executed, but he escaped unharmed to live a life of leisure abroad. I have been deceived so wretchedly. Xu Fu, I shall tear you into 10,000 pieces. Seeing that you do not understand this historical period yet remain curious, I, your teacher, shall explain it clearly. Qin Shi Huang was consumed by fury at this moment, for he believed that everything I spoke of the future was the truth. Ever since he began consuming Xu Fu's elixirs, his body had indeed gradually begun to fail him. He suffered from frequent chills and fevers. Perhaps he truly had been suffering from chronic poisoning. He composed himself, eager to hear exactly how Xu Fu had deceived him. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with immortality. While he searched everywhere for the arts of the immortals, Xu Fu emerged, claiming he could procure the secret to longevity. In truth, Xu Fu was a charlatan from the very beginning. He hoisted the banner of seeking elixirs for the emperor to exploit the wealth of the common people, committing atrocities against heaven and humanity, while never finding a single true elixir for Qin Shi Huang. Furthermore, he used toxic mercury to concoct counterfeit immortality elixirs, all to poison Qin Shi Huang. At this moment, Qin Shi Huang's expression was one of absolute shock. Xu Fu had dared to exploit the guise of seeking elixirs for his own gain. He oppressed the citizens of the Great Qin and even used poison to create fake elixirs to kill the emperor. Qin Shi Huang slammed his hand against the chamber door, causing the entire room to shudder and creak. Audacious, I shall personally execute Shufu. Your Majesty, please calm your wrath. Why should your Majesty need to strike down Shufu personally? Father, I had already submitted a memorial regarding this. The quest for immortality elixirs exhausts the people and depletes the treasury. It is a pursuit that should never have been undertaken. Now that we have uncovered that Shufu is a charlatan, we must cease these efforts immediately. Qin Shi Huang nodded in silence, then suddenly realized something, before turning his gaze toward me. Disaster had struck. The very first time we met, he had told me this was the Great Qin. I had been skeptical, believing it to be a world akin to my previous one. Later, after he discovered my talents, he sought to keep me here to tutor the princes, claiming only to be the village chief of this settlement, surnamed Qin. The young princes there were all his sons, Fusu, Huhai, and the rest. Meng Tian was his neighbor, but I had been far too agitated just now, having dared to declare I shall execute Shufu. Meng Tian and Fusu had even chimed in to support the sentiment. Qin Shi Huang hurriedly sought to offer an explanation. However, the princes of the emperor were already filled with absolute indignation. I have long found his presence insufferable. Imperial Father, I beg you to allow me to execute him. Father, the Great Qin will not tolerate such a traitor. Prince Huhai requested to lead the campaign. Qin Shi Huang felt immediately helpless. With all of you acting like this, even a pig would have guessed this is the Great Qin. At this moment, he looked toward me. I had initially thought this village was merely feudal, but I had not expected it to be so deeply and open-mindedly entrenched in feudalism. They were all fully immersed in their roles. The village chief was role-playing as Qin Shi Huang, and there were even Meng Tian and Fusu. The structure was quite complete, was it not? Why were there no princesses among them? It seemed that this feudal mindset of yours needed to be purged. Must I resort to drastic measures after all? My words? You might assume these words of mine are terms from the immortal realm, yet I am certain that I have not yet uncovered the secret. You flatter me, sir. These sons of mine lose all composure the moment they become agitated. Please continue, sir. I am at a loss for words. For I can teach the students of this remote mountain village to become university scholars. But I cannot teach the mentally afflicted to behave as normal men. I am beginning to suspect that these sons of Village Chief Qin, and indeed Village Chief Qin himself, might be suffering from some form of mental instability. The immortal elixir crafted by Shufu was concocted with mercury and was highly toxic, which is why Qin Shi Huang's health continued to deteriorate. Upon hearing that he would only live until the age of 49, Qin Shi Huang's eyes widened instantly, his vision blurred, and he nearly fainted. What? He is currently 42 years old, which means he has only 7 years left to live. Having struggled so bitterly to unify the 6 states, with so many ambitions yet to be realized, how could he die so prematurely? Teacher, may I ask if there was no method to purge the poison after the first emperor consumed the elixir? Naturally there is. Where there is a problem, there is a solution. I appreciate students who ask questions, but that is not the focus of today's history lesson. We shall discuss those matters in subsequent classes. Father, the teacher says you can be saved. I am speechless. I had just finished praising Fusu, and now he is acting delirious again. You 3 are not Qin Shi Huang. At this moment, Qin Shi Huang sat down, his mood having calmed significantly. As long as he could be cured, he would be able to fulfill his ambitions. Sir, then how exactly did Shufu manage to escape later on? That tale is truly infuriating. Xinsheng had been played like a puppet by Shufu. Unable to find the elixir of immortality, and realizing that the emperor's health was failing, Shufu began plotting his escape. Shufu told Qin Shi Huang that he had seen immortals across the eastern seas in a dream. He claimed the immortals demanded 10 ships laden with gold and silver treasures, along with 3,000 boys and girls, in exchange for the elixir. Qin Shi Huang placed his absolute trust in him. Qin Shi Huang was now burning with an unquenchable rage, for it was truly audacious. He had conquered all the states, yet he had been miserably deceived by a lowly man like Shufu, who had swindled him out of 10 ships of treasure and 3,000 youths. He truly deserves death. Qin Shi Huang felt humiliated that he could be so easily deceived by such an insignificant creature. Having suffered such utter humiliation, he decided that upon leaving, he would use a rabbit to test the elixir. If everything I said proves true, Shufu will be torn limb from limb. Yet I shook my head, a towering flame of fury erupting within my heart. Shufu not only deserves to die 1,000 deaths, but his descendants deserve the same fate. After fleeing the Great Qin, Shufu occupied the Cherry Blossom Island and became the ancestor of the Cherry Blossom Nation. Over the past 2,000 years, the Cherry Blossom Nation has invaded my Long Kingdom 4 times. In the war that took place decades ago, over 35 million people of my Long Kingdom met a tragic end. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang immediately collapsed into his chair. The entire population of the Great Qin was only a little over 27 million, yet the descendants of Shufu slaughtered more than 35 million people, all because the decision to let Shufu escape brought such a great catastrophe upon the descendants of the Great Qin. Beginning in the Ming Dynasty, the warriors, led by the Cherry Blossom Ronin, invaded the lands of my Long Kingdom and massacred my countrymen. As I spoke these words, my eyes welled with tears. Though I am but a teacher, I possess a heart filled with fervent patriotism. How could one endure such a tiny, insignificant nation daring to humiliate my mighty long kingdom? Not a single one of them is innocent. Qin Shi Huang struggled to stand, his entire body trembling. He could not believe that the man who conquered the 6 states to end centuries of war, to bring peace to the common people, could have caused this. He pursued eternal life, only because he was anxious about the future generations. Yet, in the end, his pursuit of immortality resulted in the descendants of the great Qin suffering such a monumental disaster. All of this was the consequence of him placing his trust in Xu Fu. Was he truly a sinner for all eternity? Qin Shi's mind suddenly wavered, and he nearly collapsed to the ground. But what manner of man was he? Quickly regaining his composure, he steadied his spirit and stood firm, his complexion deathly pale. Sir, speak the truth. How does later history judge Qin Shi Huang? Am I regarded by future generations as a tyrant? Am I condemned as a sinner for all eternity? Everything he had done was for the sake of the people of Great Qin, the common folk of the realm, and his descendants. He did not wish to be remembered by posterity as a historical sinner. But now, he had committed such a grave transgression, it seemed inevitable that he would be branded a sinner for eternity. Fusu Mengtian and the others all bowed their heads, waiting for my response as if anticipating a final judgment. Who told you that Qin Shi Huang was a sinner through the ages? He is my idol, the idol of all descendants for 10,000 generations to come. If one were to truly offer an assessment of Qin Shi Huang, there would be only one, the first emperor of the ages. Hearing this, Qin Shi Huang's body surged with newfound strength as he stood up. What a profound and noble appraisal this was. Sir, are these words truly genuine? How could I, Qin Shi Huang, possibly be worthy of the title First Emperor of the Ages? Although Qin Shi Huang is judged by many as a tyrant for the construction of the Great Wall, it was done entirely for the future of our common people. Remember when the king of Qin swept through the 6 kingdoms to unify the realm, ending the centuries of strife since the late Zhou dynasty. His hegemony was truly unrivaled, standardizing carriages, scripts, currency, and establishing the commandery system. Just how progressive were these ideas for that era? Launching campaigns against the Xiongnu in the north and the Baiyu in the south. Such is the dominance of an unparalleled sovereign. Throughout the span of 10,000 years, which emperor could ever claim such achievements? Qin Shi Huang certainly made his mistakes, but compared to his grand contributions, they are of little consequence. As Qin Shi Huang heard me singing his praises, as he realized his descendants did not hold him in contempt, but instead revered him as the first emperor of the ages, he was filled with immense uncontainable joy. He never imagined that the generations to come would hold him in such high regard. You are not Qin Shi Huang. What is there for you to be so happy about? That is all for today's lesson. It seems the plan to open a public hospital must be moved up on the agenda. At this moment, outside the imperial garden, Qin Shi Huang walked out and issued a solemn command. Tian, take my immortal elixir, and use it on the white mice for testing. Furthermore, dispatch 300 soldiers. Should any incident befall the mice, bring Zifu here immediately. Once Zifu is brought back, place his disciples under confinement. If a single soul escapes, I shall hold you accountable. Fusu, if any complications arise with the test subjects, summon the officials to the Shenyang Palace for an emergency meeting at once. Mengtian and Fusu both bowed in obedience, and immediately set off to carry out their orders. At this moment, Qin Shi Huang's eyes burned. If you have truly poisoned me as the immortal master has claimed, deceiving me in the process, I will tear you into 1,000 pieces. At sunset, within the Shenyang Palace, the court officials were unaware what urgent matter had prompted the first emperor to summon Crown Prince Fusu and gather them all so suddenly. Soon Qin Shi Huang strode into the grand hall draped in black imperial robes. His expression was grim, his face masked in overflowing rage. The complexions of the officials shifted drastically, and the murmurs of discussion instantly ceased. A countenance such as this signified that a momentous crisis had occurred. Even Prime Minister Li Si could not discern what was occupying the first emperor's thoughts at this moment. Has Xu Fu arrived yet? The faces of the officials paled. The first emperor had summoned them specifically because of the affair regarding Xu Fu. Many officials remained clear-headed, knowing well that immortality was an impossibility. Yet because it was the first emperor, they dared to be angry but dared not speak. At this very moment, Mengtian led Xu Fu into the great hall. Xu Fu stepped slowly into the hall, while inwardly, he pondered incessantly. He had been sitting quietly at home, yet Mengtian had donned his armor and led 300 armored guards to escort him to the Shenyang Palace. 'Twas the peerless general of the Great Qin, whose status now stood second only to the retired Wang Jian. He would not be mobilized unless a grave matter was at hand. Normally, the Shenyang Palace would not host a gathering at night, unless a major event had transpired, especially one involving such a large congregation of civil and military officials. The gravity of the situation was intensifying. Could the secret of the immortal elixir have been leaked? It seems I must prepare to flee. Your Majesty, a few days ago this one Xu Fu was visited by an immortal in a dream. revealing that 3 immortal mountains exist across the seas, bearing elixirs of eternal life, which require 10 ships filled with gold, silver, and jewels, along with 3,000 boys and girls. Is that not correct? Before Xu Fu could finish his sentence, Qin Shi Huang uttered the very words he intended to speak. Xu Fu was so shocked he began to stammer. I have never spoken these words to a living soul. How could Qin Shi Huang possibly know? At that moment, Qin Shi Huang was certain that the words he had heard were the absolute truth. Xu Fu, you used toxic substances to craft an elixir to harm me. Do you truly believe I dare not have you shredded into 1,000 pieces? Majesty, who is it that speaks such slander? Your servant has devoted heart and soul to seeking the elixir of eternal life for your majesty. I have never dared to harbor thoughts of harming you. Surely there is some villain sowing discord, daring to insult the immortal master. Guards, silence him. Qin Shi Huang had already recognized the one he had encountered as a true immortal. How could he allow Xu Fu to insult him? Meng Tian immediately summoned 2 soldiers to pin Xu Fu down. In an instant, 10 slaps were delivered, dislodging 2 of Xu Fu's teeth. Righteous officials had long been disgusted by Xu Fu's conduct. Under the guise of seeking immortal elixirs for the emperor, he had been wreaking havoc everywhere. He truly deserved such a beating. Seeing him struck down so miserably, it is needless to say how satisfied they felt. Your Majesty, I am innocent. Someone must have framed me. Then I shall show you the truth clearly. Guards, bring them forth. At the command of Qin Shi Huang, the order was carried out. 10 Qin elite soldiers stepped forward, each carrying a cage and fed the prepared elixirs to the rabbits. Xu Fu realized what Qin Shi Huang intended, to use the rabbits for a trial, and he began to tremble uncontrollably with fear. How could this be happening? They watched as the 10 rabbits remained lively and active after consuming the pills. Xu Fu rejoiced inwardly, thinking the rabbits had a strong immunity and that he would be safe. But quickly, one rabbit suddenly let out a shrill cry. It began to thrash about violently before collapsing to the ground, foaming at the mouth. Xu Fu's expression contorted in terror, and the faces of the 100 officials turned deathly pale. If a single elixir could do this to a rabbit, how could Qin Shi Huang have endured the many pills he had already consumed? Xu Fu had actually dared to feed poison to Qin Shi Huang. His audacity was greater than the heavens themselves, and Qin Shi Huang's face grew darker by the second. Right now, I feel a burning hatred, wishing I could vomit out every elixir I have ever consumed. Your Majesty, this immortal elixir was refined specifically for you. That is why I dared not test it myself. I had no idea it was poisonous. Everything I did was for the sake of your eternal life. I beg you to believe in my absolute loyalty. After poisoning me, you feared discovery and attempted to flee, even demanding 10 ships of treasures and 3,000 boys and girls. Do you call this absolute loyalty? Your Majesty, that was not an attempt to flee. The immortals commanded me to do so. My journey to the outer seas was solely to seek elixirs for your Majesty. Qin Shi Huang suddenly laughed loudly, rising from his dragon throne and stepping forward slowly. Did the immortals order you to take 3,000 boys and girls to propagate your own lineage? Did the immortals order you to conquer the islands of the outer seas? Did the immortals order your descendants to invade my dragon kingdom? Knowing the descendants of my great Qin, if any immortal dares to incite them, even if it is an immortal, I will strike them down. I shall never permit anyone to lay a hand on my descendants, even if the adversary is an immortal. The dragon might of Qin Shi Huang vibrated with such intensity that the entire Shanyang palace began to tremble. The court officials were so terrified that they did not even dare to swallow their own saliva. They did not fully grasp what Qin Shi Huang was saying, only sensing his absolute volcanic rage. Xu Fu, do you suspect how I came to know of these matters? Meng. Explain it to him. Because His Majesty has encountered a true immortal. Knowing the events of 2,000 years past, and the events of 2,000 years yet to come, knowing that the descendants of Xu Fu would ceaselessly invade the Dragon Kingdom, slaughtering the descendants of my great Qin. A wave of commotion swept through the court. Had Qin Shi Huang truly met an immortal? Were the descendants of Xu Fu truly like that? Your Majesty, that immortal is a fraud. The immortal in my dreams is the only true one. Guards, he has used mercury to poison me, so he shall bear the consequences of his own actions. Pour mercury upon his body until he meets his end, then tear his body into 10,000 pieces and burn his remains to ash. Immediately, 2 armored guards moved to drag Xu Fu away. Xu Fu laughed aloud. Qin Shi Huang, you tyrant, what does it matter if you kill me? In the annals of history, you shall be recorded as nothing more than a tyrant. Wait, Fusu, tell Xu Fu what the later generations call me. Later generations do not call the imperial father a tyrant. They call you the first emperor through the ages. The civil and military officials were stunned beyond measure upon hearing this. How profound and noble a title was this? Even the Son of Heaven of the Qin Dynasty never received such a noble distinction. Qin Shi Huang, what nonsense are you spouting? How could any man know the events of future generations? I tell you, all these wretched immortals are fakes. I deceived you, therefore you're... Is this a fabrication? Once I have executed you, you may descend into the underworld and question the ghosts and gods yourself. Hear this. I shall not only capture you, but I will also apprehend every disciple who aided you in your transgressions. I will purge every last one of you who dares to commit such wicked deeds. Let us see whether the common people remember me as a tyrant or the greatest emperor of all time. Your Majesty executes the wicked. You are undoubtedly the greatest emperor in history. Shufu had long abused his power, acting with arrogance and cruelty. The people loathed him to the marrow of their bones. How could your Majesty be a tyrant for executing Shufu and his disciples? This is the act of a truly enlightened sovereign. As Shufu was dragged from the Great Hall by the imperial guards, he was filled with profound agony and despair. Who could have possibly exposed my plans? How could I have failed? The Yinghua Empire is finished. Meanwhile, at the Shang Palace, following the decree of Qin Shi Huang, blood flowed like a river. Shufu's faction was uprooted entirely, bringing great joy to the civil and military officials. The common people throughout the realm cheered in celebration. Qin Shi Huang felt a sense of solace, satisfied that his execution of Shufu was indeed righteous. Thereafter, the ministers within the Xianyang Palace resumed their deliberations. Your Majesty, concerning the autumn harvest this year, the people in the Guangdong region of Xianyang have seen a modest yield, but the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River have suffered immense damage to their farmlands due to sudden summer flooding. The populace is suffering from a famine brought on by the crop failure. Local governors have petitioned the imperial court for emergency grain relief. Shi Huang's expression darkened. The agricultural productivity of the Qin Dynasty is woefully primitive. A field that yields even 100 caddies per mu is considered fertile land. Yet, when the year ends, the households possess virtually no grain reserves. If floods or droughts destroy the fields, the harvest available to the people dwindles even further. However, a man quickly stepped forward to object. The scholar Chun Yue. Your Majesty, this must absolutely not be done. The grain in the Xianyang granaries is reserved for the subjects of Great Qin residing in Xianyang and the Guangdong Plains. If it is all distributed to outsiders, what shall become of the subjects of Great Qin? The middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River were the territories of the former states of Zhao, Shi and Yan. The people there are not the original subjects of our Qin state. Currently, the remnants of the 6 states are restless. Letting more of them perish will only benefit the dominion of Great Qin. No sooner had Chun Yue finished speaking than many scholars immediately voiced their agreement. In their eyes, so long as the heart of Xianyang remains secure, it matters little what calamities befall the other regions. Are the lives of the people of Great Qin the only ones that matter, while the lives of the people from the 6 states are of no consequence? Just as he prepared to continue, Fusu interrupted Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang's expression changed drastically. Fusu had been deeply influenced by Confucian ideology. Could it be that he too supported the sentiments of Chun Yue and the others? The Great Qin governed the nation through legalism, though it could still tolerate other schools of thought. Qin Shi Huang did not despise them for their beliefs, but Fusu was a different matter. Fusu was the successor whom Qin Shi Huang valued above all others. The future emperor of Great Qin must be decisive and ruthless, not bound by morality and benevolence. Therefore, he had instructed Fusu many times to distance himself from Confucianism. Yet, not only did Fusu refuse to listen, but on several occasions, he had openly debated him in the imperial court. When I displayed my erudition and expressed my opposition to Confucian ideologies, Qin Shi Huang began to consider allowing me to tutor them. But this time, he still assumed that Fusu intended to support those Confucian scholars in order to oppose him. Imperial Father, this son believes the words of Dr. Chun Yue are somewhat one-sided. Now that the 6 states have been conquered, the world is unified under one banner. The commoners of the 6 states are also the subjects of our Great Qin. Now that they suffer, how can the ministers of Great Qin stand idly by? Even if they are now subjects of Great Qin, they are still inferior to the original subjects of our kingdom. How can we sacrifice the grain reserves of the original Qin people? Just to save them? If the new Qin people are inferior to the old ones, then according to the royal physician's logic, the new ministers of Qin must also be inferior to the old ministers. Royal physician, Fusu vaguely recalls that you were previously a physician of the state of Qi. Chun Yue nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. These words struck exactly where it hurt. To argue further, but he could not utter a single word in rebuttal. His face flushed crimson, and he felt as though everyone around him was looking at him with eyes full of contempt. Qin Shem silently praised him, truly outstanding. He is indeed worthy of being my son. For Fusu to be capable of speaking such words, it seems he has learned a great deal from the immortal master. Thus, he immediately concluded the imperial assembly, keeping only Fusu in the side chamber. Qin Shi Huang sat before the table, while Zhao Gao stood obsequiously to the side. Fusu sat upright. He did not flinch, entered why Qin Shi Huang had kept him behind alone. Fusu, why is it that today you did not share the same views as Chun Yue? Reporting to Imperial Father, benevolence in governance is the essential philosophy of the great scholars. To govern a nation, one must prioritize the common people. Enough, you are unworthy of being my son. Qin Shi Huang was consumed by imperial fury. He had long groomed Fusu to be the successor of the empire, never expecting him to remain so obstinate. The emperor had assumed Fusu would finally view these matters from the perspective of an imperial ruler. Yet, to his dismay, the prince still viewed them through the lens of Confucian philosophy. I thought that by refuting Chun Yuye in the imperial court you had finally begun to change your ways, the emperor demanded. I never imagined that such stubbornness was carved so deeply into your very bones. Your mind is entirely clouded by Confucian ideology. I have told you time and again, Confucianism is ill-suited for the house of the emperor. Do you refuse to heed even my words? Then, you to the immortal master has been entirely in vain. Not a single word of his teachings has penetrated your mind. I have no son such as you begun from my sight. Fusu could only depart in deep anguish. With such obstinacy, how can I ever entrust the great Qin to him? How have I sired a son so pathologically weak? Your Majesty, please I beg you not to let this fury harm your constitution. After sitting down, Qin Shi Huang looked toward Zhao Gao with a questioning gaze, asking for his opinion regarding the matter of the displaced refugees discussed in court that day. Though Zhao Gao served as a eunuch, he was a man of vast learning, possessing exquisite penmanship and a profound mastery of the laws of Great Qin. Qin Shi Huang would occasionally consult Zhao Gao while reviewing official memorials, and thus he wished to hear the eunuch's perspective. Zhao Gao allowed himself a triumphant smirk. Qin Shi Huang was ruthless and unmerciful, prone to excessive bloodshed. Did he not know what the emperor was thinking? How could he, Zhao Gao, be unaware? Having witnessed the emperor's harsh reprimand of Fusu, he understood the situation all too clearly. Your Majesty, this servants much the same perspective as the scholar Chun Yue. The deaths of the former citizens of the conquered states serve only to strengthen the dominion of our great Qin. Upon hearing this, the pupils of Qin Shi Huang's eyes narrowed slightly. Zhao Gao, failing to perceive the shifting expression on the emperor's face, continued to speak with unbridled arrogance. I humbly believe that Prince Fusu is too deeply influenced by Confucian thought. While he possesses humility, he is far too overly benevolent. He is in truth entirely unfit to inherit the imperial throne. Prince Hu Hai is decisive and ruthless. He is far better suited to inherit the throne. This servant suggests that your Majesty name Prince Hu Hai as your successor without delay. Having spoken, Zhao Ge stood there. He was the master of Hu Hai, and naturally he supported Hu Hai's ascent to the throne. The present moment was perfectly opportune. It was the perfect chance to suppress Fusu and strike him down, so that when Hu Hai eventually ascended, he would be hailed as the greatest hero of the new reign. However, the expression on Qin Shi Huang's face instantly turned ferocious. You, a mere eunuch, dare to meddle in the internal affairs of the imperial family? Do you not fear the extermination of your entire clan? Zhao Ge finally realized that serving a king is like sleeping beside a tiger, especially given the terrifying celestial might of Qin Shi Huang, a man whose true thoughts he had never been able to fathom despite years of service. Zhao Gao immediately knelt, stammering, "In this vast world, is all land not the property of the sovereign? Now, the people of the Yan, Zhao, and Qi regions are my subjects, yet you dare to suggest that their mass deaths are beneficial to governance. Do you wish for the great Qin Empire to be partitioned? Under my rule, the lands of the Long Kingdom shall never be divided. I permitted you to comment on court affairs, but your assessment is fundamentally flawed. Although Fusu may be somewhat soft-hearted, he is still the imperial son whom I value. Yet you dare, in my presence, to disparage Fusu in order to promote Hu Hai. Since when are you entitled to interfere in my family matters? Slap your own face, until dawn." Having spoken, Qin Shi Huang turned and departed. Zhao Gao was filled with immense regret. How could he have been so foolish? After serving the first emperor for so many years, how could he have spoken so carelessly? Immediately, he began to strike his own face. Early the next morning in the imperial garden, I stood upon the podium to begin the day's lesson. Students, we shall continue our study of the history of the Qin Dynasty. Today's topic is the reason for the Great Qin's collapse after only 2 generations. What? The Great Qin collapsed after only 2 generations? That is correct. The Great Qin fell after just 2 generations. Are you truly so ignorant of history? The Qin Shi Huang was struck with imperial rage. How much effort had he expended? The Great Qin had just achieved unification. The Zhou dynasty endured for 800 years. The Great Qin should have been passed down for 10,000 generations. At the very least, it should have lasted several millennia. If the Great Qin were to collapse after 2 generations, did that not mean that upon his passing, the empire would be destroyed by the very next emperor? Instantly he lunged toward Fusu. "Fu, my son, I would never. You still dare to offer excuses? It is surely your Confucian ideologies that have made you weak and dogmatic. In the end, by falling under the control of the Confucians, you shall lead the Great Qin to its ruin. You trash, Village Chief Qin, what are you doing? Why would you beat your own son to such a state? Village Chief Qin, you are my benefactor, but if you continue like this, I will no longer be able to allow you to attend my lessons. I am truly at a loss for words. Such conservative thinking, playing roles every single day, and forcing your son to play the role of Fusu, you truly treat this as if it were ancient times. Do you think you are Qin Shi Huang? Qin Shi felt a deep respect for me, and realizing he had been too impulsive, he lowered his hand, yet Qin Shi Huang still could not swallow this resentment. Sir, this brat Qinsu spouts strange ideas every single day, as if he were possessed, exactly like Fusu who led the great Qin to its ruin. He will undoubtedly destroy my Qin clan. Fusu hid behind me, wanting to defend himself, but finding no words to do so. Is the second emperor of Qin not supposed to be himself? Who says the great Qin was destroyed by Fusu? Who says the second emperor of Qin is Fusu? How can you possess so little common knowledge? Qin Shi Skifusu were both astonished. Fusu was the successor favored by the first emperor after all. Naturally it was Hu Hai. Hu Hai is the second emperor of Qin. After he usurped the throne, he lived a life of arrogance and debauchery. The great Qin perished solely because of him. The first emperor was struck with shock, so the second emperor of Qin was actually Hu Hai. At this moment, the first emperor, Fusu, and the other princes all fixed their murderous gazes upon Hu Hai. Meanwhile, Hu Hai was not even listening to the lecture, as he was hunched over, eating a chicken leg hidden under his desk. He seemed to realize that something was amiss, and abruptly looked up, meeting the murderous gaze of Qin Shi Huang directly. Frightened to the point that he immediately burst into tears. No wonder I found it strange. Even if Fusu was not a supreme conqueror, he could have at least held the empire together. How could it have fallen after only 2 generations? Why did I not consider the possibility of a coup? You have a lot of nerve, daring to manipulate my imperial edicts. My dear brother, you truly possess great ability. It was you who caused me to be struck by a heavy slap from Father Emperor. Hu Hai is currently only a teenager, completely bewildered. New village chief, you are frightening my student again. Why must you all reenact scenes from the Qin Dynasty every single day? If you have the talent, why not act out the scene where Li Yunlong rescues Xu Qin? Would that not be a truly intense affair? Teacher, of whom are you speaking? Could this Li Yunlong be a formidable general? It is not often that you, sir, speak of someone in such a manner. Sir, how exactly did Hu Hai manage to usurp the throne? Did Qin Shi Huang not place great importance on cultivating Fusu? Where could Hu Hai have possibly found an opportunity? I shall explain it to you in detail. I am quite fond of an inquisitive student like you. Qin Shi Huang held Fusu in high regard. Logically speaking, Hu Hai truly had no chance to usurp the throne. However, when Qin Shi Huang passed away, Fusu was not by the emperor's side. Because Fusu had been deeply influenced by Confucian thought and had defied Qin Shi Huang, he was exiled to the frontier to guard the borders alongside Meng Tian. Meng Tian, standing outside the door, wore a look of utter astonishment. No wonder the throne was usurped. So it was because Fusu was not present. Having said this, Qin Shi Huang glared at Fusu with eyes full of fury. Does Confucian thought not teach humility? Yet you dared to defy the emperor. It seems your exile to the frontier and the loss of your throne were inevitable. This Fusu got exactly what he deserved. Upon hearing this, Fusu fell silent, though in his heart he remained unconvinced. If father had not exiled me to the frontier, would things have ended this way? Speaking of Fusu, he is truly a pitiable figure. Though he possesses a degree of weakness, he is nonetheless a man of humility. However, an emperor must be decisive and ruthless. For his humility, Fusu ultimately paid the price. Hu Hai and Zhao Gao forged an imperial decree, claiming it to be the final testament of Qin Shi Huang, forcing Fusu and Meng Tian to take their own lives. Fusu, harboring no suspicion whatsoever, proceeded to end his own life. Hearing these words, Fusu's eyes widened. Had he truly met such a tragic end in history? Qin Shi Huang was so enraged that he flew into a fury, looking at Fusu with an expression of utter disdain for his incompetence. Has Confucian teaching truly rendered you so spineless? You could not even distinguish a true imperial decree from a false one. You are not even the equal of Hu Hai. But surely, any prince who saw such an imperial decree would have no reason to doubt it. It is true that any prince might be deceived by such a decree. Throughout history, Fusu met a tragic end. He was the successor to the empire whom Qin Shi Huang valued above all others. Aside from Fusu, Qin Shi Huang did not groom any other heir. Even when Fusu was exiled to the frontier by Qin Shi Huang, it was merely to temper his resolve. One must realize that this was the very location guarded by Meng Tian. On the surface, Qin Shi Huang appeared to banish him, but in reality, he intended for Fusu to undergo hardship, to abandon Confucian doctrines, and to be forged into a man of iron and blood. Had things proceeded as the first emperor envisioned, Fusu would have changed his temperament. Even if Hu Ai were to usurp the throne and forge an imperial decree, what of it? At Fusu's side was Meng Tian. With Wang Jian now aged and retired from the front lines, Meng Tian stood as the most formidable general of the great Qin Empire. Furthermore, under Meng Tian's command stood the 300,000-strong Great Wall Legion, the most elite force of the great Qin. Having fought the Xiongnu for years, their combat prowess was terrifying, far surpassing that of the Imperial Guard protecting Xianyang. If Hu Hai had forged the imperial decree, Fusu could have simply torn it to shreds, declared the decree a fabrication, and then led Meng Tian's vast army to march upon Xianyang. With the prestige Fusu commanded, what could Hu Hai have possibly done? At the time, Meng Tian had urged Fusu to do exactly this. arguing that the decree might be a forgery, yet Fusu refused to listen. In the end, he committed suicide. Fusu had taken his own life. Meng Tian was left without any recourse, and subsequently took his own life as well. Had Fusu not perished, Hu Hai would have been crushed. Fusu was truly a fool. What, in the end, had this Fusu actually learned? The emperor was overcome with grief. Could it be that all these years, my efforts to nurture Fusu were in vain? Was Fusu unable to comprehend my intentions? How could I have ever issued a decree to execute my own son? As a father, he was deeply disillusioned. Out in the wilderness, Meng Tian let out a long sigh. I have fought the Xiongnu and commanded the battlefield my entire life, earning countless military honors, only to meet such an ending. A general who does not die on the field of battle, but falls instead to political intrigue and the weakness of his sovereign. Meng Tian's heart was filled with profound sorrow. Fusu also suffered immensely, his heart heavy with shame. His ideology had become far too rigid and archaic. Not only did he bring about his own death, but he also caused the demise of General Meng Tian. This would hasten the downfall of the great Qin in the second generation. He would never again embrace the teachings of the Confucian school. But when all is said and done, Fusu's death was his own affair. Yet the fall of the great Qin rests squarely upon the shoulders of Hu Hai. The great Qin perished in its third generation, the ancestral foundations utterly destroyed by the hand of the second emperor. Hu Hai had been standing to the side, gloating as he watched everyone berate his elder brother Fusu. But the moment I spoke, every gaze in the room shifted instantly toward him, and Qin Shi Huang's expression darkened, and he began to walk step by step toward Hu Hai. Usurping the throne was one thing, but to issue a decree to execute Fusu and General Meng Tian, that was truly a feat of audacity. Furthermore, Hu Hai went on to slaughter over 20 of the emperor's other children. This was beyond monstrous. This time it was not only Qin Shi Huang and Fusu who were incensed, but the other 20-odd children of the emperor were also filled with rage. They all surged forward, surrounding Hu Hai. Qin Shi Huang's expression remained grim. Modifying the imperial edict could perhaps be understood. After all, Hu Hai desired the throne for himself. Eliminating Fusu was also in a cold sense understandable. For as long as Fusu lived, the throne would never be secure. But to slaughter one's own brothers, what possible justification could there be for that? Even if it were to consolidate power, what possible reason could there be to kill his own sisters? This had long since ceased to be about securing a throne. This was clearly the behavior of a depraved mind. Does a son such as this still deserve to live? Burman, come inside and take him away. Though Qin Shi Huang was seething with rage, he still retained a sliver of reason, refusing to reveal his true identity in my presence. Meng Tian acknowledged the order and led Hu Hai away. Matters of life and death were not to be settled in this place. At this moment, I continued. The fall of the great Qin is certainly a great crime of Hu Hai's, but the primary fault does not lie with him alone, but with another. Zhao Gao. From the very beginning, it was Zhao Gao who coerced Li Si into altering the emperor's final testament, which allowed Hu Hai to ascend the throne. This Zhao Gao has immense gall to dare profane my imperial majesty in such a manner. You are not Qin Shi Huang, so why are you so incensed? Although I had grown accustomed to the village chief Qin persona, I could not help but offer a cynical retort, and Qi's gaze turned increasingly frigid, for he had not expected that beyond Zhao Gao, Li Si would also be complicit. He had been under the impression that Li Si would have opposed Zhao Gao, Shufu refining poisonous immortality pills, Zhao Gao sowing chaos within the great Qin, Hu Hai usurping the throne, and Li Si altering the sacred decree. The more Qin Shi Huang contemplated it, the more enraged he became. He truly could not trust anyone anymore. Later, Zhao Gao appointed his own cronies to office, and in order to eliminate those who opposed him, he brought a deer into the imperial court. Zhao Gao declared the creature a horse, and in the end he executed all the high officials who dared to insist that it was in fact a deer. He purged them all. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang was so enraged that he desired to execute Zhao Gao immediately. Those who insisted that it was a deer were the truly loyal officials who refused to collude with Zhao Gao. Zhao Gao used this method to identify and subsequently execute every one of them. Zhao Gao's audacity knows no bounds. Zhao Gao did not merely eliminate his opposition in the imperial court, he also encouraged Qin Shi to increase taxes and forced labor. Chancellor Lis, who opposed these excessive levies, was executed by being sliced at the waist by Zhao Gao. In the end, the exploitation by the imperial court became truly unbearable. The common people were forced to rise in rebellion. Hearing this, Qin Shi Huang nearly fainted from pure fury. The great Qin had only just unified the 6 kingdoms and was still reeling from the disasters caused by the Xiongnu and the Baiyu, which necessitated slightly higher taxes. He was well aware of this, but any further increase would be catastrophic. If the common people cannot survive, they will naturally revolt. For this man, Zhao Gao, to dare increase taxes further, is this not simply driving the people of the world to rebel? At the same time, Qin Shi Huang harbored deep resentment toward Li Si. This was because Li Si had tampered with the emperor's final decree, yet upon hearing that Li Si had attempted to prevent the increase in taxes and labor, he still felt a modicum of stirring in his heart. Why then, could he not have remained loyal to the very end? Fusu slumped into his chair, his entire body devoid of strength. The other princes bowed their heads in silence, unable to fathom how an empire as formidable as Great Qin could simply collapse. Has it truly fallen just like that? With so many elite soldiers at its disposal, how could Great Qin possibly lose to a mere mob of peasants? The cause is twofold. While the Great Qin soldiers were indeed elite, and their commanders were indeed battle-hardened, the rebel forces also boasted many formidable warriors. For example, Xiang Yu of Chu was exceptionally powerful, yet the more significant cause was Zhao Gao. While Zhang Han was engaged in battle against Xiang Yu, Zhao Gao plotted to have Zhang Han executed the moment he achieved victory. Faced with such treachery, Zhang Han had no choice but to surrender. What? It is Zhao Gao again, a mere eunuch who dares to throw the Great Qin court into chaos. He deserves death. Furthermore, Qin Shi was aware that he wished to overturn the heavens and earth, but at that time, the entire imperial court was nothing but a faction under Zhao Gao. The result was that he was forced by Zhao Gao to commit suicide. Thereafter, Zhao Gao seized control of the imperial government. The 10,000 generation legacy left behind by the first emperor of Qin was utterly destroyed by this vile sycophant. At this moment, Qin Shi Huang could truly no longer contain himself. He loathed the man so deeply that he wished to immediately descend and execute Zhao Gao. He had stirred chaos throughout the Great Qin and exploited the common people. He even dared to commit regicide against Hu Hai. Regardless of whether Hu Hai was a dim-witted monarch, he was still the emperor. Zhao Gao, once I return, I shall execute your entire clan to the 3rd degree. So what was the ultimate fate of Zhao Gao? Did he manage to escape his crimes? Qin Shi Huang calmed himself, hoping to hear a satisfactory answer. If Zhao Gao were to end up like Xu Fu, committing every imaginable atrocity yet emerging unscathed, then the entire Qin clan might as well commit suicide now. He did not escape judgment. Seeing that the Qin army was no match for the rebel forces, Zhao Gao chose to secretly collude with Liu Bang, only to be undone by the very person he had installed in power. Qin King Xing used a ruse and struck him down with a single blade. In the end, Zhao Gao met his demise. Splendid. To kill a man like Zhao Gao with a single stroke is far too merciful. If Zhao Gao were allowed to die so easily, what of those he persecuted to their deaths? Would subjecting him to the punishment of being torn apart by 5 horses not be too cruel? Fusu, your father is right to say that you are perhaps a bit too benevolent. There are people to whom one can show mercy, but the deeds of some individuals are enough to make one's blood boil with hatred. Many thanks for your guidance, master. Great Qin may yet be saved. Qin Shi Huang now looked upon me with both reverence for my erudition and profound gratitude. For had it not been for me, he likely would still be consuming the elixirs of Xu Fu, and the Great Qin would undoubtedly have perished at the hands of Zhao Gao. You are not Qin Shi Huang, so why do you thank me? Enough. We have covered much today, and our lesson shall conclude here. Master, there is one more matter this old man does not understand. Qin King Xing slew Zhao Gao, but what was his ultimate fate? Qin Shi Huang, regarding his children, Fusu and Hu Hai were deeply unsatisfied. Fusu was weak and incompetent. A single forged imperial decree would be enough to end his life. He failed entirely to grasp the painstaking intentions of his father. Hu Hai was even more stubborn and unteachable, obsessed only with indulgence and pleasure. They allowed Zhao Gao to wreak havoc upon the Great Qin. Yet this Qin Ziying seemed not so terrible after all. One must realize that he was merely a puppet, propped up by Zhao Gao, who would never grant him any shred of real authority. Furthermore, Zhao Gao held deep-rooted influence within the imperial court. Yet, Qin Ziying not only outmaneuvered and executed Zhao Gao, but also reclaimed the supreme power. He was filled with curiosity regarding the later deeds of King Ziying of Qin. Although King Ziying was capable, the Great Qin at that time was already suffering from a terminal decline, beyond any hope of salvation. Renowned generals had fallen in battle, and the elite legions had been annihilated. King Ziying implemented numerous measures, yet he could not turn the tide. In the end, Xianying was breached by the armies of the anti-Qin rebellion. In 207 BC, the Great Qin collapsed. Qin Shi Huang was struck by sudden shock, standing frozen in place. He had heard me mention that his own passing would occur in the previous year. If so, did that not mean that a mere 3 years after his death, the Great Qin had met its destruction? Shi Huang truly could not believe it. The Great Qin, built over 6 generations to unify the realm, did not need to be compared to the 800-year span of the Zhou Dynasty, or even the 500-year duration of the Shang Dynasty. Yet the result was not even a fraction of their legacy. The princes present lowered their heads. They had assumed the Great Qin would last for 10,000 generations, never expecting it to be so short-lived. While they remained immersed in their hedonistic lives, Qin Shi Huang suddenly looked toward the princes before him and spoke. That was the tragedy of another world. Now that we know this history, we must set out to change it. The Great Qin is an invincible empire. Your father will lead you to slay Zhao Gao and tear him into 10,000 pieces. Meanwhile, in the Shanyang Palace, within the sleeping chambers of Qin Shi Huang, Zhao Gao and Li Si slowly toward the bedchamber, both wearing grim expressions. Though Li Si was an outside official, he was very close to Qin Shi Huang, often sharing wine and meat together. However, recently he had found himself increasingly unable to understand Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang had constructed an imperial garden and insisted that an immortal resided within, forbidding anyone from entering. He refused to speak when asked, and Zhao Gao felt all the more aggrieved. Xiao Gao had served Qin Shi Huang for many years, within the entire palace, let alone Prince Fusu. Not even the imperial concubines understood Qin Shi Huang as well as Zhao Gao. However, ever since the imperial garden was completed, communication between him and Qin Shi Huang had grown increasingly infrequent. Shi Huang had only ever permitted Meng Qingtian to enter his inner sanctum. He had never allowed Zhao Gao entry. Nevertheless, they did not know why they had been summoned today alongside Li Si. As the two men pondered this, they stepped into the sleeping quarters. Upon witnessing the scene before them, they were struck with a sense of astonishment. In the center of the hall sat Qin Shi Huang, reviewing bamboo slips, but surrounding him stood more than 20 princes. At their head was Fusu. Of Qin Shi Huang's sons were present, with the sole exception of Hu Hai. What could this possibly mean? Qin Shi Huang rarely summoned all the princes at once. They were deeply unsettled and unable to grasp the reason behind it. They immediately knelt to perform their obeisance, yet Qin Shi Huang merely let out a cold snort and remained silent. The two men performed the ritual with trepidation. By this time, Qin Shi Huang should have already granted them permission to rise. What has come over the emperor? Qin Shi Huang then set aside the bamboo slip in his hand and spoke. Are you wondering what is wrong with me? As the left chancellor and the prefect of the carriage office, do you expect to rise after merely paying your respects? Are you worthy? The faces of Li Si and Zhao Gao turned deathly pale. What is the meaning of this? Your Majesty, I truly do not know what crime I have committed. Your Majesty, this servant has served you with all his heart and strength. I have never committed any transgression against you. Upon hearing Zhao Gao's plea, Qin Shi Huang charged forward and delivered a kick directly to Zhao Gao's face. Zhao Gao let out a cry and collapsed to the side. Blood immediately surged across his face, and 2 of his teeth were knocked loose. Li Si, witnessing Qin Shi Huang's explosive rage, was filled with absolute terror. How could this be happening? Today my father and I visited the Immortal Master to receive his teachings. The Immortal Master told us that the Great Qin would perish after 2 generations. What? The Great Qin would perish after 2 generations? Li Si remained deeply loyal to the Great Qin, and upon hearing that the empire would fall in 2 generations, he found it impossible to believe. How could the mighty Great Qin possibly perish? Impossible. Was the 2nd generation of the Great Qin not meant to be Prince Fusu? With the prince here, how could the Great Qin perish after only 2 generations? After the emperor passed away, the one meant to ascend the throne was supposed to be me. Who would have expected that you and Zhao Gao would dare to forge the imperial decree? You installed Hu Hai as emperor, while you and Hu Hai conspired to issue a fake decree against me. I was forced to take my own life, and General Meng Tian was implicated as well. Speaking of this, Fusu clenched his fists in fury. In the past, my studies in Confucian doctrine had truly blinded me to the truth. I possessed not a shred of resistance or spirit of defiance. I not only caused my own downfall but also the demise of General Meng Tian. If General Meng Tian were still alive, even if the entire Great Qin territory rose in rebellion, how could the anti-Qin forces have triumphed so easily? Tian was truly a man capable of turning the tide on the battlefield. Installing Hu Hai as emperor was one thing, but Zhao Gao supported the debauched and incompetent Hu Hai, who knew only of indulgence, eventually squandering the entire foundation of the Great Qin. Furthermore, you, Zhao Gao, went on to slaughter loyal officials within the imperial court. You presented a stag as a horse, executing everyone who dared to speak the truth and insisted it was a stag. You kept only those who blindly affirmed it was a horse. Even Li Si eventually met his end at your hands. What? Li Si widened his eyes as he looked toward Zhao Gao. I was murdered by Zhao Gao? Impossible, these are completely baseless accusations. Your Majesty, what kind of person is Zhao Gao? Does your Majesty not yet understand? Zhao Gao desperately scrambled to deny the claims. Seeing Qin Shi Huang, Zhao Gao kowtowed, and Li Si hurriedly spoke up as well. At this moment, he and Zhao Gao were as grasshoppers tied to the same string. Your Majesty, this servant believes that such talk of the future is far too ethereal and lacks substance. It is not certain to happen. It is not certain to happen. Do you believe that Zhao Gao installing Hu Hai, exploiting the common people, and forcing them to revolt is a fabrication? Qin Shi Huang let out a cold laugh, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Do you believe that Zhao Gao's manipulation of the court and forcing the 2nd emperor to commit suicide to install a puppet is a fabrication? All of these things were revealed to me by the Immortal Master, and you claim that all of this is false? Qin Shi Huang was filled with immense rage, and his sword instantly drew from its scabbard. It was even faster than the legendary moment Jing Ke attempted to assassinate the King of Qin. He pressed the blade against Zhao Gao's throat, his expression chillingly cold. Tell me then, what else is true? Zhao Gao, who had been kneeling, was now so terrified he collapsed to the floor, pleading frantically, Your Majesty, this is absolutely impossible. Your Majesty must have been deceived. What about Shu Fu? He has yet to find the elixir of immortality for you, which only proves that such immortals do not exist in this world at all. How could your majesty, because of some immortal who appeared out of thin air, doubt the loyalty of a minister who has served you for so many years? Shu Fu is guilty because there is concrete evidence that his elixirs are poisonous, but there is no proof that I, your humble servant, would ever betray your majesty. Your majesty, all talk of the future is merely speculation. I truly believe that the words of that immortal master are falsehoods. If you execute me without evidence, you will deeply hurt the hearts of many loyal subjects. Qin Shi Huang, upon hearing Zhao Gao's words, began to hesitate. Shu Fu indeed had irrefutable evidence against him, but as for Zhao Gao, there truly was no proof of betrayal. At that very moment, Meng Tian stepped into the hall. Zhao Gao, you still dare to spout nonsense? Your Majesty, I have been acting under your secret orders. After Zhao Gao left his residence, I searched it, and I have unearthed a mountain of incriminating evidence. In Zhao Gao's estate, I found conclusive proof that he has been colluding with other high-ranking officials. Zhao Gao is indeed harboring treasonous intent. Gao deserved death. It turned out that Meng Tian had been absent because Qin Shi Huang had tasked him with gathering this evidence. So that was how it was. Qin Shi Huang slowly stood up, his sword humming with a sharp metallic ring. His killing intent was becoming impossible to suppress. Your Majesty, this is absolutely not the case. Even if these things were true, they are merely possibilities of the distant future. They were based on the premise of Shu Fu living and Your Majesty passing away. Now that Shu Fu is dead, and Your Majesty is in the prime of your life, these tragedies will certainly never come to pass. Zhao Gao was struggling in desperation, his words becoming erratic and frantic. Furthermore, Shu Fu is already dead. There can be no true immortal masters in this world, and that new immortal must be a charlatan using sorcery to bewitch you. A complete fabrication. As the words left his lips, in the very next heartbeat, a spray of fresh blood erupted as one of Zhao Gao's arms was severed clean off. Zhao Gao writhed in agony on the floor, trembling. How could this have happened? Such audacity to dare insult the immortal master? And Shi Huang was filled with immense fury. Zhao Gao actually dared to insult the immortal master. Even Simeix's hesitation from Meng Tian would be a sign of disrespect toward the immortal master and his imperial father. So, what was he to do? He deceived his superiors, forged imperial decrees, forced Fusu to commit suicide and to consolidate his own power. He had all of my sons slaughtered. In other words, every one of you holds a debt of blood and nation against him. Zhao Gao deserves to die. Fusu, who had always been humble, could no longer restrain himself at this moment. Disregarding his Confucian teachings, the other princes stepped forward one after another. On his end, Meng Tian threw over 20 sharp swords, which had been prepared well in advance, into the center of the grand hall. Zhao Gao was terrified out of his wits. What is the meaning of this? Your Majesty, I beg for my life. Please spare me. Eliminate this traitor. At Qin Shi Huang's command, all the princes charged forward simultaneously, each wielding a blade. The grand hall echoed with the wretched screams of Zhao Gao. He felt regret. Why had he ever betrayed Qin Shi Huang? What was he in the grand scheme of things? Merely a eunuch. And who is Qin Shi Huang? He is the true heavenly dragon. Yet he had the arrogance to attempt a rebellion. What he regretted even more was insulting that man. He was an immortal master whom even Qin Shi Huang held in high reverence. By insulting him, he feared that even in the afterlife, his soul would never find peace. Ziying dealt him a sword strike, muttering that a quick death was too merciful. A waste, for a man like him deserved only this end. And Shi Huang looked upon Zhao Gao without a shred of pity, simultaneously ordering Meng Tian to thoroughly investigate Zhao Gao's kin and the servants within his estate. Anyone who colluded with Zhao Gao shall be executed. Any court officials who conspired with Zhao Gao are to be purged. To eradicate evil, one must strike at the root with absolute ruthlessness. Such is the way of an emperor. To be merciful toward a man like Zhao Gao is to be cruel to oneself. Fusu, standing to the side, witnessed all of this. He experienced a sudden epiphany, realizing that his past self had been foolish to place, believing in it to the point of losing his own life, and constantly defying Qin Shi Huang, harboring dissenting opinions against the first emperor. Looking back now, he realizes how foolish he truly was. He was completely unworthy of being an emperor. The decisive ruthlessness of Qin Shi Huang is the true essence of the imperial Tao. At that same moment in the imperial garden, I was preparing my notes to review the lessons for tomorrow. Suddenly, the chime of the great teacher system echoed in my mind. Your student, Qin Su, has achieved a profound epiphany and his ideology has been elevated. Reward 3 marrow-cleansing elixirs. Upon consumption, it instantly purges toxins from the body, enhances the host's appearance, and grants the user 50 additional years of longevity. This marrow-cleansing elixir is not bad at all. With 50 extra years of life, does that not mean I have 50 more years to educate others? However, the detoxification and fat-burning effects seem to be of little use to me. I am already so handsome. System notification reward granted. Master level traditional medical arts, capable of curing various common ailments. As the mechanical voice of the system faded, I instantly felt the meridians and acupoints of the human body, like a clear, intricate map unfolding within my mind. All manner of traditional therapeutic methods, acupuncture, meridian massage, and various manual techniques were etched into my mind as if carved in stone. Seeing them so deeply imprinted, I could not help but be astonished. The medical knowledge bestowed by the system is far superior to that of a veteran physician with decades of practice. My grand ambition is to open the first people's hospital in this small village. I have now taken another step forward toward that goal. Congratulations, you have received the master-level technique for forging all types of cutlery. There were even a set of finished forged blades included. I was overcome with joy. The knives currently available here are neither durable nor sharp. If I possessed the techniques to forge superior cutlery, how wonderful that would be. Then I could craft truly formidable kitchen knives. Elsewhere, in the private chambers of Qin Shi Huang, Li Si looked at the corpse of Zhao Gao beside him, his face deathly pale with terror. Qin Shi Huang gazed at Li Si, his eyes filled with profound disappointment. Li Si, have you already forgotten? Do you remember what your status was all those years ago? If not for me, could you have ever attained the position of Prime Minister of this empire, as you have today? Although Feng Qiji holds a higher rank than you, can his position in my heart ever compare to yours? Li Si, you and Zhao Gao conspired to alter the imperial edict. Is this how you repay the favor of my recognition? Lisa trembled in fear, utterly to find any words to justify his actions. What is the matter? Are you unable to offer a defense? It seems to me that you have no words left to justify your actions. Anyone who betrays me deserves to die. Your Majesty, this subject would never betray you. Do you truly believe I would still trust your words? Guards. Seize Li Si. Yet as the words reached his lips, Qin Shi Huang hesitated. Although Li had betrayed him in his final moments, he had remained loyal and died for the sake of Great Qin. There was a profound bond of ruler and subject between Qin Shi Huang and Li Si. Qin Shi Huang found it difficult to make this decision on a whim. Confine Li Si for the time being. Suspend all of his duties and let Feng Shi temporarily take his place. Meng De could well understand Qin Shi Huang's struggle. With that, have Lisa taken away. We shall seek the Immortal Master's counsel tomorrow. Li Si, your life and death shall be left to the Immortal Master to decide. The following day, after concluding the morning court session, Qin Shi Huang led Meng Tian toward the imperial garden. Following behind Qin Shi Huang were Qin Xing, the nominal Qin Sanshi, and his mother. Both Qin Xing and his mother were completely bewildered. Within the palace, they were nothing more than nobodies. How could Qin Shi Huang possibly take notice of them? Yet the moment Qin Shi Huang laid eyes upon Qin Xing, he was overjoyed. He showered Qin Xing with endless concern and affection. Such sudden warmth was most unexpected and unnerving. Qin Xing was dazed, for his own father had never been in favor with Qin Shi Huang. Come here, Xing, and follow me inside. Upon reaching the entrance, Qin Xing's mother halted. However, Qin Shi Huang took Qin Xing by the hand, insisting he accompany him within. Qin Xing's mother widened her eyes in shock. Having lived in the palace, she had long since heard the rumors regarding the imperial garden. It was said that Qin Shi Huang had recently encountered an immortal within those grounds, after which he had ordered the area sealed off, permitting only the princes to enter. Only those with the rank of general or higher are permitted to enter. Even the Prime Minister Li Si, a man of immense power, and Zhao Gao, whom Qin Shi Huang favors and trusts deeply, are barred from entry. Yet Qin Xing is able to enter. This is truly a monumental honor. With his son favored by Qin Shi Huang, a bright future surely awaits him. Qin Xing, held by the hand of Qin Shi Huang, feels a hint of timidity, yet he is immensely thrilled. He watches the rockeries of the imperial garden pass by one after another, filled with profound anticipation. He has long heard whispers of immortals dwelling within the imperial garden, yet he has never laid eyes upon one. Could it be that Qin Shi Huang intends to lead him to meet these immortals? The thought is truly exhilarating. At this very moment, around a bend in the path, Fusu and Prince Gao are carrying baskets of vegetables toward the pond to wash them. Prince Fusu, Prince Gao, do you two intend to wash these vegetables yourselves? After offering a formal bow, Qin Xing stares at the items in their hands, utterly astonished. The ancients said that a gentleman should stay far away from the kitchen. If one must avoid cooking, then surely washing vegetables is beneath them as well. Qin Xing simply cannot believe his own eyes. You speak of washing vegetables? Master Chu says, reading 10,000 books is not as valuable as traveling 10,000 miles. One must experience things for oneself and strive to become a well-rounded individual. Not only must one excel in scholarship, but one must also be capable in all other tasks. Therefore, washing vegetables is also a mandatory lesson. Qin Xing finds it impossible to accept this line of thinking. It is in direct contradiction to the 3 fundamental bonds and 5 constant virtues he has studied. You will grow accustomed to it in time. The reason I have brought you here today is to place you under the tutelage of Master Chu, so that he may instruct you. Qin Shi Huang is no longer surprised by my teaching methods. At first, he was somewhat resistant and found it difficult to accept. However, he later discovered that his sons were becoming increasingly decisive and possessed stronger personal convictions. He realized then that my methods were sound. He no longer holds any resistance toward them. Qin Shi Huang's words. Qin Ziying feels as if he is living in a dream. Even Qin Shi Huang himself is in full support of this. His curiosity piqued even further as to how this master instructs his students. The two of them finally arrive, but Village Chief Qin, you have arrived. My senses are twice as sharp as an ordinary person's, so I perceived your presence in an instant. Hearing my words, Qin Ziying was somewhat bewildered. Why did I address Qin Shi Huang as the village chief? Furthermore, he keenly observed that I appeared to be blind. But seeing that Qin Shi Huang did not deny it, he understood that it was best not to speak out of turn. Teacher Chu, this is Qin Ying, my grandson. I leave him in your care. Grandson? To think he already has a grandson. I was utterly astonished upon hearing this. Village Chief Qin is only 41 years old this year, yet having a grandson is not entirely unheard of. After all, the village chief already has over 20 sons. I could not decide whether to call the village chief conservative or liberal. This Qin Ying, surely the name refers to an infant, not the cherry blossom, and he is not a girl, right? My name is spelled with the character for infant, not the one for cherry blossom. I am not a girl. Very well, let us set these matters aside for now. Let us eat first. The dishes are served. At my command, the sons of Qin Shi Huang acted like servants, bringing out one platter of food after another. The table was a massive rectangular structure, capable of seating everyone present. Qin Shi Huang took the seat of honor, and the other sons took their seats in order. Once everyone was seated, I smiled cheerfully. I have been preparing for this day for a very long time. Today, please eat to your heart's content. This is an all-pork feast, prepared by my own hand. What? An all-pork feast? Teacher Chu, pork is considered lowly meat. It has a foul odor. How can it even be consumed? Qin Shi Huang was immediately stunned upon hearing this. Meng Tian and Qin Ziying's expressions changed drastically. In ancient times, swine were typically not castrated, which resulted in a particularly pungent odor when prepared as food. Consequently, ancient nobility shunned pork, and it was generally consumed only by commoners, who were too impoverished to afford anything else. Lowly meat, you say? This is hardly the ancient era. Furthermore, I have castrated this pig. There is not the slightest trace of a foul odor. Qin Shi Huang wore an expression of complete astonishment. Can a pig actually be castrated? Father, I implore you to try it. This pork is truly succulent. My brothers and I have already tasted it. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang looked on with half-hearted suspicion. He then picked up a piece of the trotter, taking a bite of the collagen-rich meat, and was struck by immediate astonishment. His pupils dilated in shock. It was truly exquisite, and without even a hint of gamey odor. He felt it far surpassed the taste of beef, as well as mutton and dog meat. What is this creature called? This is known as the swine elder, and because it weighs exactly 8 taels and 8 qin, it is also called Zhu Chongba. Tian grabbed the trotter in one hand and the pig's tail in the other, eating until oil dripped from his lips. Qin Shi Huang grew uncharacteristically excited. If not for the dignity of his imperial position, he would have discarded all decorum to eat with his bare hands. I have made my decision. From this day forward, this pork shall be the highest ceremonial dish we serve to our most distinguished guests. Hearing his declaration, I was truly left speechless. How could such a small village possibly host any distinguished guests? However, what I did not realize was that this was no mere village, but the very heart of the great Qin Empire, Xianyang Palace. Furthermore, I could not have known that Qin Shi Huang would one day truly use this pork to entertain a visitor from the future. Yi Zhizhong, the founding emperor of the Great Ming, Teacher Chu, how is it that you know everything? Why was I unaware of this until now? Can the removal of the boar's scent truly make it so palatable? It is not just myself. Even the greatest imperial physicians and master chefs remain ignorant of this. In truth, the pork feast I prepared did not utilize the vast array of seasonings found in the modern era. I was deeply curious myself, for this village lacked electricity, automobiles, and even basic varieties of vegetables. That I could perhaps understand. Yet they lacked chili and cinnamon, which was strange enough, but even soy sauce and monosodium glutamate were nowhere to be found. To ensure the pork feast was a success, I had made extensive preparations beforehand. I brought various aromatic spices, plants for heat, and refined raw salt into fine table salt. But despite my efforts, they did not even possess a proper wok for stir-frying, forcing me to stew the meat, and only by using lard was I able to achieve such a result. Qin Shi Huang, however, was dining with immense delight. He had never encountered such culinary methods, and he found the flavors remarkably exquisite. At this moment, he truly wished to dismiss every chef currently serving in his palace. What kind of garbage have those people been feeding me all this time? This is without a doubt the finest meal I have ever tasted in my entire life. Truly, who would have imagined that the act of castrating a pig could result in such a delicious meal? Yet, every time Qin Shi Huang speaks, I cannot help but view him as someone suffering from delusions of grandeur. I am accustomed to it by now, but we are in the 21st century. How can they be ignorant of this castration technique? I truly find it difficult to comprehend. If wish to learn, I am willing to teach you. Is that true? This is something that can be taught. If I master this skill, does it not mean that I, the Emperor, shall have access to prime pork every single day? Old Meng, follow my immortal master and learn the art of castrating pigs. The village chief, Meng Qian, remained silent. After all, in the Qin era, he was the great general Meng Tian. Would you really have Meng Tian study the castration of pigs? If one were to suggest such a task, it would be better to send Zhao Gao. He is the most adept at such affairs. What is wrong with having Meng Tian study this? Before Qin Shi Huang could speak further, I suddenly interjected. I stood up, my expression solemn. Seeing me rise, everyone present set down their chopsticks. They knew I was about to begin another lecture. Teacher Su, why must Meng Tian learn this? He is a top-tier great general. Is it not enough for him to lead troops into battle? Then let me ask you, when Meng Tian wages war, does he rely solely on himself or on the soldiers under his command? He relies on his soldiers. If he had not a single soldier, he would be unable to wage war. Then let me ask again, is it more effective to lead a starving army into battle, or to lead an army that is well-fed and well-rested? Which is more effective in combat? Naturally, it is the one that is well-fed. An empty stomach leaves one with no strength to fight. However, this still has nothing to do with castrated pigs. Let me ask you this. If one side of the army grew up eating meat, and the other grew up eating tree roots, which side would be more formidable in battle? Hearing this, Meng Tian seemed to grasp the point. He understood what I was trying to convey. Meng Tian frequently engaged in battle with the Xiongnu. He understood the Xiongnu people deeply. The Xiongnu wore tattered clothing and lacked proper armor, yet they did not rely on farming. They survived solely by herding cattle. Sheep. They might not be tall, but their bodies were incredibly sturdy and robust. While within the territory of the Great Qin, famine was a frequent occurrence, so much so that the soldiers of the Great Qin rarely even had enough grain to eat. For the most part, they were forced to survive on wild vegetables, let alone meat. Yet when all is said and done, meat cannot be produced in mass quantities. Oxen are essential tools of production. In Great Qin, every plowing ox is officially registered in the imperial records. It is no exaggeration to say that a single ox is often considered more valuable than a human life. Not only would the unauthorized slaughter of a plowing ox lead to execution, but even the herder would be severely punished if their cattle were found to be emaciated. As for mutton, one should not even dream of it, for how could the Central Plains sustain the grazing of massive herds? That was a feat exclusive to the Xiongnu, and thus, the soldiers of the Great Qin rarely consumed meat. Consequently, although they were rigorously trained, their physical constitutions could never be truly improved. Every time the Great Qin army clashed with the Xiongnu, they suffered at a disadvantage. As Meng Tian contemplated this, he gradually understood my intent. So, Master Chu means that if the Great Qin can succeed in pig farming, then everyone would be able to consume pork, and the physical constitution of the Great Qin's soldiers could be dramatically strengthened. Indeed, since ancient times, nomadic tribes have consumed far more meat, which is why their basic combat capability has always surpassed our people of the Central Plains. However, if our people of the Central Plains can also make meat consumption widespread, then the gap in basic combat strength can surely be bridged. Do you understand now, Old Meng? Do you still feel that I am wasting your talents on trivial matters? I do not. Master, please allow me to follow you and learn the glorious craft of castration. Meng Tian was overjoyed beyond measure, his mind filled with visions of leading the grand army into battle against the Xiongnu. It tore his heart apart to think of his soldiers being slaughtered by the Xiongnu, not due to a lack of skill, but simply due to a lack of proper nourishment. Now, with the widespread practice of pig farming, the people of the Great Qin would finally be able to eat their fill of meat. I will teach you, but eating pork alone is not enough. One must maintain a balanced diet. Hey you there. The chicken stewed with potatoes should be ready by now, shouldn't it? Bring it forth. I did not know what had transpired, but I sensed that Meng Tian was deeply stirred. He must have been suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of bitter memories. I gave my immediate consent. So sooner had I finished speaking than two young masters entered the kitchen, emerging with a large basin of steaming, fragrant food. Qin Ziying caught the savory aroma of chicken stewed with potatoes. Salivating, Qin Shi Huang immediately tasted a piece of the chicken. He exclaimed in astonishment, "This dish is truly exquisite. How is it that the immortal master is capable of crafting such a delectable meal? The meat is tender and fragrant. What are the imperial chefs even doing? Every time they prepare chicken, it is tough and dry. This is a chicken that I personally had selected and raised for 2.5 years." Hearing this, Qin Shi Huang nodded, admitting that the bird was indeed of high quality. He then reached for a piece of potato, and his brows furrowed slightly. What is this? It seems I have never laid eyes on this variety of food before. These are potatoes. Are you unfamiliar with the potato? It serves as both a staple and a delicacy. Is this a new variety of crop? And what is the yield per mu? The harvest? It is not particularly vast. It yields approximately 3 to 5,000 jin per mu. What? 3 to 5,000 jin per mu? Is this a divine object? Qin Shi Huang and all the young masters seated at the table were so shocked that they rose to their feet in unison. In the era of Great Qin, where slash-and-burn agriculture prevailed, farming remained underdeveloped, and agricultural tools were significantly primitive. Consequently, the yield of various crops was far from substantial. Thus, if a mu of land could produce 100 jin of grain, it was already considered fertile soil. If one could harvest 200 jin, it would be seen as a manifestation of the immortals. A blessing from the heavens. Immortal Master Su, tell me, is this truly the truth? Can this type of plant, this potato, truly yield 3 to 5,000 jin per mu? Qin Shi Huang gripped my hand tightly. I was filled with astonishment. Is a mere potato enough to shock them to this extent? They have even called me an immortal master. Have you people truly never interacted with the outside world? Are you living in complete isolation from the rest of the world? Nevertheless, I answered his question. If the harvest is poor, it yields about 2,000 jin. With a good harvest and proper cultivation, 5,000 jin is not a problem. What? 2,000 jin, this is truly a divine object. Qin Shi Huang was on the verge of fainting. One must realize that even the finest fields in the Great Qin only yield 200 jin of grain, yet this potato produces at least 2,000 jin even at its worst. Qin Shuangxia was incredibly agitated. For some time he had been tormented by the famine plaguing the commoners in the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River. Many ministers in the imperial court had suggested abandoning these people, but would abandoning them not be equivalent to severing a limb of Great Qin? Yet Qin Shi Huang could not conceive of a way to resolve the famine without abandoning his subjects. But now the solution had appeared. The potato capable of producing at least 2,000 jin per mu. If planted nationwide, the food crisis of the entire empire could be resolved. You people truly live in total isolation from the world. To think you do not even know what a potato is. How did you manage to survive until now? Potatoes are marvelous. They can resolve the food shortage for the entire population. They are also easy to plant. Cut us into pieces, bury them in the soil, and water them. That is all that is required. Furthermore, they can be harvested twice a year, reaching maturity in just 2 or 3 months. But why are you all so ignorant of potatoes? I truly suspect have I arrived in the ancient era. Hearing them words, Qin Shi Huang became immediately anxious. We cannot let you discover this is the Great Qin. How could this be the ancient era? It is simply that we are uneducated. Master Su, how many potatoes do you still have? I still have over 400. These are all for you. What did you say? There are only a little over 400 tubers. It is a pity. It would have been better if there were more. Hearing Qin Shi Huang was both overjoyed and deeply pained. He was overjoyed because I was not stingy in providing the potatoes to him. He was deeply pained because 400 tubers, when spread across the entire country for planting, would be nothing more than a drop in the ocean. But, fortunately, potatoes can be harvested twice a year, with each crop taking only 2 or 3 months to mature, and they are not selective about their environment. In this way, there is no need for planting cycles to spread them across the whole land. Yet, Qin Shi Huang and the young masters were filled with immense regret. Had they known that potatoes were such miraculous objects, they would not have eaten them. At this moment, Qin Shi Huang spoke to Meng Tian, General Meng. From now on, you shall be in charge of the swine farming, and the cultivation of the potatoes shall also be under your responsibility. Upon hearing this, Meng Tian felt deeply honored. Swine farming could strengthen the physique of the Great Qin citizens. Meanwhile, potatoes would resolve the dire food shortages that have plagued every dynasty. Both tasks were tied to the future of the Great Qin Empire, yet Qin Shi Huang chose to entrust these duties to him. It is evident that this was a sign of absolute trust, leaving Meng Tian overwhelmed with joy. He was nearly moved to tears and immediately knelt before Qin Shi Huang. General Meng thanks the village chief. Please, rise. However, was covered in black lines. Must we even follow a cosplay protocol for farming and animal husbandry? I truly cannot comprehend the significance of these rituals. Meng Tian was now brimming with heroic spirit. As long as the potatoes are cultivated well, the commoners across the land will be well fed. If the livestock are raised well, the commoners will grow robust and strong. When that time comes, every soldier under his command will be as sturdy as an ox. Then, when engaging the Xiongnu, will we not crush them until they cry out in agony? What Qin Shi Huang contemplated in his heart was far more expansive. Years ago, when he observed that the character for person was written in many different ways across the regions, he became determined not only to unify the 6 kingdoms, but also to sweep away the Xiongnu, the Bayou, and even the lands beyond. However, Qin Shi Huang was often unable to act on his ambitions. The battle lines were stretched too thin, and logistical support remained a major concern. The consumption of grain was truly colossal. Relying on the national strength of Great Qin and the current agricultural output, it was impossible to sustain such a massive demand for food. Now that the potatoes are here, with a yield of over 2,000 caddies per mu, this production could easily increase the population of Great Qin tenfold. By then, conquering the Xiongnu and the Baiyu would be nothing more than a trivial matter. Qin Shi Huang desired to strike at even more distant lands and claim every corner of the world he knew. This vast world shall all be brought under the banner of the Great Qin. Qin Shi Huang was incredibly stirred. Truly, he was in the presence of an immortal master. In his desire to make the empire flourish, he bowed before me in a grand gesture of respect. Master, you have bestowed upon us two unparalleled national treasures. They were overflowing with gratitude, yet I had merely given them a few potatoes and taught them how to raise pigs. Could these truly be called unparalleled national treasures? Afterwards, the group resumed their meal, a feast that Qin Shi Huang enjoyed with great relish. He had not expected that the problems which had always plagued him could be resolved so easily and so simply by my hand. He was truly an incredibly fortunate man. It was his good fortune that he chose to keep me by his side that year. But just as Qin Shi Huang was taking a bite of pork trotter, his complexion suddenly turned deathly pale, and he collapsed heavily to the side. Why do I find myself without a shred of strength? Seeing this, Meng Tian rushed forward to support Qin Shi Huang. The other young lords were also seized with terror. How could he have been perfectly healthy moments ago, only to suffer such a calamity now? Yet, in the following heartbeat, the situation grew even more dire, as the left arm and leg of Qin Shi Huang began to twitch uncontrollably. His mouth began to twist, and he let out a loud shout, before falling deathly silent. Seeing this, Fusu cried out in terror, then fearfully checked Qin Shi Huang's breath. Tears welled up in his eyes immediately. Meng Tian also realized what had transpired, and fell directly to his knees, a great warrior shedding tears without restraint. His Majesty has passed away. What is all this clamor about? If you continue like this, a man who might not have died will surely be scared to death by you all. Is this the time to be wailing about His Majesty passing away? I truly cannot tell if this is a genuine ancient era or a counterfeit one. Upon hearing my sharp rebuke, Fusu was overcome with sudden joy. Because I am an immortal, he believed that I must possess a way to save Qin Shi Huang. Master Su, please save my father. I will grant you anything you desire. I have no interest in men. Stand aside. I currently possess the skill of traditional Chinese medicine at the common level, granted by the system. Although it is merely classified as common, that is only by the system's definition. In reality, its proficiency far exceeds that of the top-tier medical specialists in the outside world. Without further hesitation, I walked to the side of Qin Shi Huang and placed my hand directly upon his pulse. Pulse reading is a profound art of traditional medicine, allowing one to observe the state of a patient's heart, their kidneys, and the condition of their lungs. I knitted my brows. His kidneys were extremely weak. It appeared his liver was failing as well. His heart rate was dangerously high. This was a clear sign of poisoning. I had reached a general understanding of the situation. Why had Qin Shi Huang reached such a state? Village Chief Qin had been suffering from long-term poisoning. His body was frail and burdened by obesity, and he suffered from hypertension, which had triggered a cerebral infarction, ultimately leading to a cerebral hemorrhage. Even if he were taken to a hospital, I fear the situation would be difficult to resolve. Kidney failure, liver damage, systemic poisoning, and a cerebral hemorrhage. With these three factors combined, even a hospital would struggle to treat him. Though they did not understand what a hospital was, they gathered from my tone that his condition was grave. Fusu nearly rolled his eyes back and fainted on the spot. Does this mean there is no hope left for Qin Shi Huang? Meng Tian too began to weep in agony. Was the Qin Shi Huang, to whom he had sworn his absolute loyalty, destined to depart this world before him? Why all this wailing and lamenting? Am I not still here? Indeed, indeed. Does Master Chu intend to perform acupuncture or prescribe traditional herbal medicine? I shook my head. If my medical skills were more advanced, I might be able to employ such methods, but my current mastery is insufficient. Moreover, I have a far simpler method. Quickly, I retrieved a pill from my storage pouch and sighed. This was the marrow-cleansing pill gifted to me by the system. My own constitution had always been decent. After consuming one of these elixirs, my body had become significantly more robust. It was truly like being reborn, and it had even granted me an additional 50 years of lifespan. Yet it was a pity that my eyes remained unhealed. Everything had been conducted in the shadows, but now I have no choice but to reveal it. Village Chief Qin once saved my life. If I do not save him, my conscience will be burdened for the rest of my days. This medicinal pill was bestowed upon me by the system. It can purge toxins and reconstruct the body, effectively bringing Village Chief Qin back from the brink. The efficacy of this pill is rather miraculous, so do not be startled, and under no circumstances are you to speak of this to others. Fusu and Meng Tian were struck with awe. Could it be a divine elixir? I quickly took the pill and fed it to Qin Shi Huang. The following second, the aura that had completely vanished, leaving Qin Shi Huang devoid of vitality, suddenly surged as his complexion turned ruddy. He began to break into a cold sweat, his pores dilating as a viscous black substance began to seep from his skin. Seeing this, Fusu was both shocked and overjoyed. The matter being expelled was nothing but toxins. Ishi had consumed the divine elixir of Zifu. The toxins accumulated within his body over many years were finally being purged. Shortly thereafter, once the black substance had been expelled, an abundance of yellowish-white fluid began to erupt from his body, and Qin Shi Huang's obese frame began to shrink incessantly. His defined muscles slowly became visible. Witnessing this miraculous effect, everyone present was utterly astounded. It was a simultaneous purification of toxins and weight loss. Old Meng, quickly boil a pot of hot water so the village chief can bathe, otherwise your village chief will be reduced to a pile of sludge. Meng Tian responded immediately and hurried off to heat the water. Once yesterday they carried Qin Shi Huang inside to bathe. Tian and Fusu took charge of the task, while the others waited outside. At this moment, all the princes present fell to their knees before me. Master Su, please accept our kowtow. Thank you for saving our father. The man I saved is not just your father, but the Emperor of Great Qin. The princes' expressions shifted in terror. They had been discovered. Qin Shi Huang had warned them 1,000 times over, never to let me discover that I was in Great Qin. Once discovered, they feared I might refuse to teach them further, or even if I continued, I might not be willing to impart my true skills with sincerity. The princes present stammered, at a loss for how to respond. Even Qin Xing, who was known for his decisive nature, was left without a plan. I remarked to them that these students were truly unbelievable, for their act was incredibly convincing. How could such a thing as transmigration possibly exist in this world? In truth, I noticed they often enjoyed cosplaying, which is why I chose to tease them. Transmigration is far too difficult to believe. Even with a system in my possession, I find it hard to accept. Seeing this, the crowd immediately eased their guard. Fortunately, it was merely a false alarm, though they still had to play along with me. Everyone laughed in unison. Father had finally recovered. Shortly after, supported by Fusu, a towering figure stepped forth. The crowd gazed upon the man before them, utterly astonished. Draped in dragon robes, his aura was majestic and imposing. His physique was more robust than before, and his complexion had grown significantly fairer. In particular, the signs of his year-round exhaustion from reviewing memorials, the dark circles under his eyes, had completely vanished. His gaze was now clear, sharp, and full of vitality. Qin Shi Huang observed the stunned expressions of his sons, though their reaction was entirely within his expectations. To say nothing of them, even Qin Shi Huang himself had been immensely shocked when he first caught a glimpse of his own reflection. Upon hearing that it was I who administered the medicinal pill, he realized that it was my doing that led to his transformation. Qin Shi Huang grew even more awestruck by my capabilities. Teacher Su, was that a divine pill you gave me? What are its properties? It expels toxins, reduces bodily impurities, restores vitality, and furthermore, grants an additional 50 years of lifespan. What? Cleansing toxins and slimming the body is one thing, but to grant 50 years of life, Teacher Su, and you still claim you are no immortal? This medicinal pill possesses effects beyond anything you could ever imagine. Therefore, I implore you all to keep this matter quiet. Otherwise, once word of this spreads, criminals will come to pillage, and official organizations may very well attempt to detain me. Village Chief Qin, you have a life-saving grace toward me. Had I not saved you, my conscience would never find peace. However, I ask that you all help me keep this secret. This concerns my personal safety. It is not a problem. From this day forth, you shall proclaim that the change in my condition was a blessing bestowed by an immortal. Anyone who dares to leak even a single word regarding the immortal, even my own sons, shall be executed. I frowned, wondering how it was that, despite detoxifying his body, improving his health, and extending his lifespan, his symptoms of Chunibyu had yet to subside. Just as Qin Shi Huang prepared to depart, he suddenly recalled one more thing. Teacher Su, I wish to seek your counsel on a certain matter. Suppose that in the Qin era, if Qin Shi Huang knew of Li Si's betrayal, would he have him executed? Qin Shi Huang countered with this question. Meng Tian and the various princes standing nearby immediately turned solemn. Li Si had always been the most favored and trusted minister of Qin Shi Huang. They were once so close that they would even share a single piece of meat between them. Furthermore, Li Si possessed immense capability. Under his support, the Great Qin gradually grew wealthy and powerful. Therefore, although Li Si ultimately betrayed Qin Shi Huang in another timeline, had he not remained loyal in this present moment? Moreover, Li Si eventually admonished Hu Hai, which could be considered serving the Great Qin with loyalty until his death. Qin Shi Huang fell into deep hesitation regarding whether to execute Li Si, while the princes and Meng Tian watched with bated breath. This was placing the fate of the empire's prime minister entirely upon my words. Whether Li Si lives or dies now rests solely upon my judgment. If Li Si is executed, who would be left to govern the Great Qin? Could men like Feng Ji or Feng Ji truly manage the empire as effectively? The Great Qin cannot afford to lose Li Si at this juncture. Furthermore, Li Si's treachery only manifested because Qin Shi Huang had passed away. As long as Qin Shi Huang remains alive, he can eternally keep Li Si under his thumb. Upon hearing my words, Qin Shi Huang was overjoyed. Truth be told, he was genuinely reluctant to see Li Si put to death. I thank the immortal master on behalf of Li Si. But you are not Qin Shi Huang. What are you thanking me for? Moreover, are you not afraid that I might suspect this is indeed the Qin Dynasty? Even if I were to say, this is the Qin Dynasty, you would not believe me anyway. Master Su, I have another question. Should Prince Hu Hai be executed? Li Si possesses talent and strength that benefit the great Qin, so he should not be killed. Although Hu Hai led the nation to its ruin, he is his son after all, and Qin Shi Huang still harbored a sliver of paternal affection. In truth, while Hu Hai is inferior in terms of ability, his temperament is at least more resolute than that of Fu Su. If Fu Su were to become emperor, governed by the teachings of Confucianism, his character would likely be too benevolent and soft-hearted. Let alone governing the nation even when faced with opposition from ministers at court, I fear he would not even dare to execute a single soul. If the Xiongnu armies or the people of Baiyu were to invade, I fear Fu Su would be so compassionate as to cede territory and sue for peace. Upon hearing this, both Qin Shi and Fu Su's temperament is such that he might truly do exactly that. But Hu Hai is different. Though he is a tyrannical and immoral ruler, slaughtering the innocent without cause, much of his behavior stems from Zhao Gao's manipulation. If not for Zhao Gao's influence and with Qin Shi Huang's personal guidance, then once Hu Hai's character is refined, he might just become a capable monarch after all. An emperor must possess the resolve to act decisively. Transforming from a benevolent emperor to one who acts with resolve is a difficult transition. However, transforming from an emperor who slaughters indiscriminately to one who acts with calculated resolve is perhaps a far simpler task. Understood. My gratitude to Master Chu. Qin Shi Huang spoke, then departed. This journey today has truly yielded abundant rewards. First, obtaining the two peerless national techniques of castration and potato cultivation, then receiving an immortal elixir that purged the toxins from my body, and even granted me 50 additional years of life. Master Chu is truly a god among men, sent by the heavens to strengthen Great Qin Mengtian Imperial Garden. How many armored guards have been deployed in total? A total of 500 armored guards have been deployed. 500? What kind of high-level security detail is this? Not even the estates of the great Qin ministers command such a guard. Even the chambers of Qin Shi Huang do not have such a force, yet he felt it was still far from enough. This place is the center of the empire's prosperity. How could it be protected by a mere 500 guards? If I were to be abducted by some scoundrel, regret would be useless. Transmit my order. Demolish all structures within 100 meters of the Imperial Garden. Establish a military garrison, and mobilize 3,000 elite armored troops to stand watch day and night over the Imperial Garden, under the personal command of you, Mengtian. Upon hearing Qin Shi Huang's decree, Mengtian was utterly shocked that he was held in such high regard. The other young masters were equally stunned. In the era of the warring states, 3,000 armored troops could destroy a small kingdom, yet now they are arranged to guard a single person. They believed Qin Shi Huang valued me highly, but they could not fathom the true thoughts within his heart. If conditions had permitted, Qin Shi Huang would have stationed 30,000 troops to guard me. Meanwhile, inside my mind, the system's voice resonated once more. Congratulations, Master. Your student Qin Su has experienced a moment of enlightenment. You are awarded the blueprint for a curved plow. I was stunned. What could I possibly need with a blueprint for a curved plow? Before the Tang Dynasty, straight plows were used. The soil was shallowly tilled, labor-intensive, and required 2 oxen to pull. After the Tang Dynasty, the curved plow revolutionized farming, allowing for deeper tilling with less effort, requiring only a single ox. While the curved plow has indeed improved agricultural efficiency, what use is it to me? Your student Qin Gao has achieved an increase in his knowledge base. Congratulations, host. You have received the blueprint for a water wheel. Once again, I was taken aback. A water wheel is a hydraulic device used for the irrigation of crops. It is highly efficient, capable of irrigating fields continuously day and night. Furthermore, it requires no animal labor to operate. In modern times, these are still utilized in many places. Compared to early water lifting methods, this design is vastly superior, yet it remains useless to me. I was speechless. If you want me to draw water, could you at least provide me with a pressurized pump? Your other students have all achieved an increase in their knowledge. Congratulations, you have received 100 seeds each of chili, cucumber, eggplant, and corn. Upon hearing of these crops, my spirits lifted. The previous 2 items were useless, but these vegetables certainly have their merits. Especially the chili. I am a man who finds no joy in food without spice. The arrival of these chilies is truly wonderful. At the same moment, within the Xianyang Palace, the first emperor of Qin stood before the eldest prince of the great Qin Empire, Fu Su. General Mengtian was also present. They were awaiting the arrival of Li Si. Accompanied by an announcement, a figure stepped into the hall, his presence commanding silence. It was Li Shi who bowed. Your humble servant Li Shi pays his respects to your majesty. Li Si's eyes were filled with profound astonishment. The Qin emperor had once been slightly stout with a swarthy complexion, yet now his eyes were piercing and alert, his physique robust and powerful. Is this truly the first emperor of Qin? If this man were to step onto the battlefield, I fear even the likes of Li Mu or Lian Po would be struck down. What is it? Do you no longer recognize me? Your Majesty, it is nothing. I have met with an immortal master who bestowed gifts upon me. Can it be that such beings truly exist in this world? They most certainly do. Furthermore, the immortal master told me something. He said you, Li Si, deserve to die. Upon hearing the words of the first emperor, Li Si was plunged into the depths of despair. Did Qin Shi Huang truly intend to heed the immortal master's words and put him to death? Yet, as a man of great experience, Li Si soon regained his composure. For those in high positions, life and death are often viewed with indifference. Your Majesty, this subject is guilty. I beg for a decree of death. Li Si felt as if his heart had turned to ash, knowing that in the eyes of Qin Shi Huang, his crimes were unforgivable. Today I visited the immortal master. He declared that you, Li Si, must not be killed, for the prosperity of Great Qin cannot do without you. What I did just now was merely to test your resolve. Had you been like Zhao Gao or Xu Fu, flying into a rage and hurling insults, you would not have walked out of this hall alive. Li Si stood stunned, feeling a wave of immense fortune wash over him. How fortunate it was that he had not spoken rashly. Thinking of the fates of Zhao Gao and Xu Fu, he could not help but shudder. Though he could view life and death with indifference, if one could choose to live, why seek out one's own demise? I thank your Majesty for your mercy and grace. Li Si, the growth of Great Qin relies upon you, and your capabilities are formidable, but I do not wish for you to use them as a crutch. If, in the future, you truly commit the transgressions the immortal master predicted, I would rather see the development of Great Qin stagnate than allow you to remain among the living. Qin Shi Huang rose slowly, his hand resting firmly upon the hilt of his sword. Under these heavens, there is no one who can threaten my rule. Your Majesty, this subject harbors absolutely no thoughts of rebellion. For the remainder of my life, I, Li Si, shall remain steadfast in my duty to you. I shall not shirk even if death calls upon me a myriad of times. Deep down, Li Si felt a tremor of fear, for he could not be certain if his future self would truly betray Great Qin. Yet, he knew one thing for certain. As long as Qin Shi Huang reigned, he would never dare to betray the empire. Qin Shi Huang was the only person in this world who could utterly suppress him. Bring forth the item. Shortly after, Meng Tian produced an object wrapped in a delicate silk cloth. Li Si knew this was the secret Qin Shi Huang intended to reveal to him. He furrowed his brows. It was round and the size of a fist. Was this merely a lump of soil? It appeared to have the likeness of a plant. It seems that even a prime minister of your vast knowledge has never laid eyes upon such a treasure. Fu Su, explain this item to the prime minister. This object is known as a potato. It is a type of agricultural crop. It can be used as a staple food or as a culinary ingredient. It can be fried, stir-fried, boiled, or roasted. All methods of preparation yield a delicious result. In truth, Great Qin possessed no such culinary variety. Yet Fu Su had kept the methods I described firmly in his... Furthermore, potatoes are easy to cultivate. One simply needs to cut them into pieces, water them, and they will flourish. They can be grown twice a year and are ready for harvest in just 2 or 3 months. They are incredibly satiating, making them perfectly suited as military rations. This, Li Si immediately became intrigued. Being both a staple crop and a viable dish, coupled with their delicious taste and filling nature, they are truly an excellent source of sustenance. So can one me of this potato yield 1 shi? It is no wonder he is the Prime Minister of Great Qin. His first question immediately struck the crux of the matter. 1 shi of the Great Qin era is roughly equivalent to over 100 jin. Even on the best farmland in Great Qin, a single mu typically yields only 100 jin. If the potato yield could reach 100 jin, it would certainly be considered a premium crop worthy of being popularized nationwide. At present, the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River are suffering from famine. This type of hardy crop is exactly what is needed. Hearing Fu Su shook his head and smiled. It was not merely 1 shi. Then what of half a shi? If it yielded half a shi, combined with the potato's taste and ability to satisfy hunger, serving as a staple food, and possessing its hardy nature, it could arguably be popularized across the empire. But upon hearing Li Si's words, not only Fu Su, but Qin Shi Huang and Meng Tian could not help but laugh. Do not tease Minister Li any further. The yield of these potatoes is not 1 shi, nor is it half a shi. In a poor harvest year, 1 mu can produce approximately 20 shi. In a bountiful year, it can produce up to 50 shi. Upon hearing this, Li Si nearly jumped to his feet. He was rendered almost senseless with shock. A minimum of 20 shi. 50 shi is equivalent to over 5,000 jin by the standards of future generations. The finest fields of Great Qin can only produce a little over 100 jin. Li Si felt his entire worldview shattering. He found it utterly impossible to believe. Prime Minister, there is no need for doubt. Initially, I did not believe it either. But this was spoken by the Immortal Master. It cannot be wrong. Had this been in the past, Li Si might have remained skeptical. But having witnessed the profound transformation in Qin Shi Huang, a seed of conviction began to take root in his heart. Yet, it remained difficult to fathom. If thousands of caddies could truly be cultivated, then the plague of famine would be resolved instantaneously. Furthermore, just how formidable would the great Qin Empire become? Do not be quick to marvel. Observe what lies here. Li Si accepted the handkerchief handed to him by Qin Shi Huang and examined it. It contained the method for castrating swine. Once castrated, the physical stature of the swine would grow to be significantly larger than those left unaltered, and furthermore, castrated swine would be devoid of their pungent odor, rendering the meat far more succulent and fresh when prepared. These were the opening claims. Li Si was stunned. Though he did not command armies on the battlefield, as prime minister, his mind was sharp enough to perceive the brilliance of this strategy. Meat would enable the soldiers of the great Qin Empire to fortify their bodies. Indeed, in the past the Xiongnu sustained themselves on vast portions of meat, leaving them with robust physiques. The soldiers of our great Qin, when engaging them in battle, suffered indescribable hardships, but now our Qin soldiers may also consume meat at every meal. What then would remain to be feared of the Xiongnu? Even before possessing these things, I had already conquered the 6 kingdoms. With these things now in my grasp, the entire world shall fall under my dominion. If this truth comes to pass, the great Qin will undoubtedly grow even more powerful. Consequently, the territories of the great Qin shall surely expand. That is correct. I desire to conquer a vast empire, so that every inch of land under heaven may be illuminated by the glory of our Huaxia. This entire world must belong to Huaxia. All under heaven shall submit to Huaxia. Long live the majesty of Qin Shi Huang. By noon the following day, Qin Shi Huang arrived at the imperial garden, accompanied by Li Si. He intended to bring Li Si along to bear witness to my capabilities. However, Li Si found himself astonished by what he saw along the way. The area surrounding the garden for 100 paces had been reinforced, with 3,000 elite Great Qin soldiers stationed there. 3,000 elite soldiers during the Warring States period were enough to eradicate a small nation. If an immortal truly resided within, it was evident that Qin Shi Huang held this immortal in the highest regard. The two men entered the imperial garden, passing clusters of artificial rockeries, nearing the study hall. Li Si noticed something that caught his attention. He leaned over to peer toward a pond, overcome with amazement. The pond was fed by running water through an inlet, but beside the inlet, someone had installed a massive wooden structure. Its overall shape was circular, suspended and rotating upon a supporting frame. On the outer rim, there were numerous containers continuously rotating in a cycle, while water poured from them, drenching the fields nearby. Is this a divine artifact? Who could have invented such a thing? The Qin Dynasty does possess water wheels, but they are quite primitive and yield very little water, yet this device is truly gargantuan. Furthermore, I have never seen such a mechanism that provides a continuous flow of water. Although I could not see from within my room, my hearing is sharp, and I had heard the voice of Qin Shi Huang for some time. Why are you all so astonished? This is merely an ordinary water wheel. An ordinary water wheel? Do you truly call this an ordinary water wheel? If this device were applied to our agriculture, it would undoubtedly be an invention that defines an era. It is not easy for the people to sow their crops, and irrigation is even more arduous, often requiring them to carry heavy pots to fetch water. But with this water wheel, the task of irrigation becomes significantly simpler. It conserves human labor while ensuring the crops are well nourished. And yet, I have the audacity to call it a mere water wheel. Li Si could not help but appraise me. This demonstrates that the things they perceive as heaven-sent marvels are to me quite commonplace. Could it be that I am truly an immortal? Li Si observed me closely. I was clearly handsome, yet my eyes remained devoid of sight. Qin Shi Huang, realizing what Li Si was focusing on, hurriedly intercepted him. Master Chu, you have created something so advanced. My eyes have truly been opened once again. Qin Shi Huang had long since grown accustomed to the advanced creations I brought forth. However, seeing it in person still left him stunned. How immense would this contribution be to the Great Qin? The path for the Great Qin to achieve prosperity has taken yet another leap forward. Is this really considered advanced? It is just a water wheel. Have you never watched television? Who is this television? Why must we watch him? Qin Shi knew that television was undoubtedly another object from my immortal realm. Since we must watch her, television must surely be a beautiful, elegant, and virtuous woman, is she not? I truly wish to take television as one of my consorts. If you take these, they are of no use to me. After handing them over, I took out a piece of goatskin. I do not know why the system refuses to give me paper, providing only goatskin instead. Perhaps it assumes that if I grow hungry one day, I can boil the goatskin for a meal. I only grow a few vegetables around the classroom, and since you all say this is a water wheel that cannot be used with a plow, holding on to this curved plow blueprint is ultimately useless. After all, the curved plow is an invention from the Qin Dynasty. It has been over 1,000 years since then. It would be truly strange if this village did not utilize it. Qin Shi Huang accepted the blueprint, momentarily speechless. Whatever items I deemed useless, I simply handed over to him. It turns out that Qin Shi Huang was nothing more than a glorified scrap collector. Though he thought this to himself, he still accepted it honestly. Even a single hair plucked from my body is precious to him. But in the next second, Qin Shi Huang and Li Si were struck with absolute astonishment, their eyes widening in shock. On the curved plow blueprint, the structure and utility were noted with perfect clarity, and they were so overwhelmed by the potential of this design that they nearly lost their composure. The Qin Dynasty also possessed straight plows, but they were neither energy efficient nor flexible, often requiring 2 oxen to pull. Furthermore, they only tilled the soil quite shallowly, but this curved plow was different. It was not only flexible and labor-saving, but it could also plow the earth to a significant depth, usually requiring only a single ox to pull it, and even men of great strength could manage it themselves. This is truly a divine artifact. Is this truly so advanced? Is this not the most basic of designs? Yes, this is merely the most basic design. Master Chu, this is Old Li from our village. He is the most talented man in the village. Old Li, where is your artillery? Drag it out and fire a volley at Tu Qin. Li Si was left completely bewildered. Which Old Li, what artillery? And who is Tu Qin? Tu Qin is not here, so there is no need to fire. Your village is truly far too backward. I cannot even make a simple joke. I truly begin to doubt whether I am a traveler who has crossed over from a future era. Future generations? Master Suo, I have always been curious. Regarding the future generations you spoke of, what will the fate of the great Qin Empire be? Li Si had long heard Qin Shi Huang speak, that the great Qin would fall after only 2 generations, and thus, he was deeply curious as to what the world would become after the great Qin's collapse. If you wish to know, then today we shall study the 2,000 years of prosperity that followed the great Qin in the Middle Kingdom. Soon enough I stood upon the podium and began today's lecture. Below the podium sat more than 20 of Qin Shi Huang's children, with Qin Ziying, Qin Shi Huang, and Lisa standing at the entrance, listening intently. Today's lesson seemed to hold a great deal of appeal. Do any of you know which dynasty succeeded the great Qin? No one could provide an answer. Seeing this group of ignorant souls, I decided to rephrase my inquiry. Master wishes to ask, as we have previously mentioned Liu Bang and Xiang Yu. I can tell you that the founding emperor of the next dynasty will be one of these 2 men. Who among you believes it shall be which one? It must surely be Xiang Yu. That is what Master Suo implied after all. In battles between Xiang Yu and Zhang Han, neither could gain the upper hand. Liu Bang, however, has never faced a renowned general. Since Xiang Yu is such a brilliant commander, it must certainly be him. Li Si and Qin Shi Huang both nodded in agreement. With Xiang Yu's prowess on the battlefield, it must be him without a doubt. Incorrect. It is Liu Bang. The crowd was caught off guard. Xiang Yu is a master of war, yet Liu Bang is not particularly skilled in combat. For Liu Bang to emerge victorious despite this, he must truly possess a hidden talent. How did Liu Bang manage to win? Liu Bang is a man of complex nature, and the factors that led to his triumph were numerous. But ultimately, it was his ability to win the hearts of the people, and his talent for recruiting capable subordinates. As for Xiang Yu, he was arrogant, prideful, and deeply conceited. Because he did not know how to value talent or cultivate loyalty, he was destined for failure. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang and the others nodded in contemplation. Failing to value and employ men of talent is a sure path to failure. Liu Bang entered Shenyang first, but upon his arrival, he imposed the 3 chapters of law upon his troops. Those who killed would be executed. Thus, the soldiers under his command committed not a single offense upon reaching Shenyang. Qin Shi Huang and all those present were stunned. How did this Liu Bang acquire such refined manners? Even after the great Qin annihilated the 6 kingdoms, it never treated the commoners or the nobility of those lands with such benevolence. And what did Xiang Yu do? Xiang Yu entered Shenyang, burned the Apeng Palace, slaughtered the entire imperial clan of the great Qin, and buried 200,000 surrendered Qin soldiers alive. Upon hearing this, everyone present rose to their feet in profound shock. The astonishment of Qin Shi Huang transformed into a state of absolute fury. Xiang Yu was originally a great general of the state of Chu, the descendant of Xiang Yan, yet Xiang Yan was slain, the state of Chu was destroyed, and many in the Shang clan had also perished. Consequently, Xiang Yu harbored a deep-seated hatred for the great Qin, and the moment he entered Shenyang, he began a campaign of slaughter. Not a single soul of the great Qin imperial clan survived, including the final ruler of the great Qin. As for Qin King Ziying, I let out a heavy sigh. The death of Qin Ziying was truly a lamentable tragedy. What? This Xiang Yu actually wiped out the great Qin imperial clan and executed Qin King Ziying as well. This Xiang Yu is far too brutal. The young lords present were consumed by a sudden surge of rage. Remembering their own kin who had been killed, they were filled with righteous indignation. Yet suddenly, Qin Shi Huang realized something. The victor is the king, and the vanquished is the captive. That is simply the way of the world. Just as the great Qin had annihilated the state of Chu, the imperial clan of Chu had been slaughtered, and many of the Shang clan had also been put to death. Therefore, the actions of Xiang Yu were not difficult to comprehend, yet Qin Shi Huang remained deeply incensed. Regardless of the circumstances, these were his descendants. It was one thing for this Xiang Yu to exterminate the imperial clan of Great Qin, but to massacre 200,000 surrendered Qin soldiers was another matter entirely. If this Xiang Yu were to become emperor, he would be a true tyrant, even more ruthless than Hu Hai. Halt. Although I hold Qin Shi Huang in high regard, Xiang Yu was truly a figure of legend. By the age of 14, he possessed the strength to lift a cauldron, and had already displayed unparalleled martial prowess at the dawn of his uprising. Xiang Yu and his uncle Xiang Liang found themselves ensnared by a scheme orchestrated by the local magistrate. Surrounded by over 100 men, Xiang Yu single-handedly slaughtered them all, subsequently rising to become the leader of the rebel forces. His combat style became renowned for its ferocious intensity on the battlefield. In every engagement, Xiang Yu would charge at the forefront, mounted upon his prize steed, Wu Zhui. Throughout the 1,000-year history of Huaxia, kings are as numerous as feathers, yet there has been only one overlord. Later, at the Battle of Pengsheng, he led 30,000 Chu troops to charge forward, utterly crushing Liu Bang's coalition of 560,000. One can clearly perceive the dominance of the overlord Xiang Yu, the pinnacle of battlefield valor, to defeat a coalition of 560,000 with a mere 30,000. Upon hearing this, Meng Tian was momentarily stunned into silence. Meng Tian was himself a decorated veteran of 100 battles, a famous general of Huaxia, yet even he found the prospect of defeating 560,000 with only 30,000 to be an impossible feat. Meng Tian truly did not know whether to praise Xiang Yu's valor or condemn Liu Bang's incompetence. Yet, hearing of this Xiang Yu whom I have just introduced, Meng Tian could not help but knit his brows. Such individual valor elevates the morale of an entire army. Should he ever face Xiang Yu in open combat, even Meng Tian felt he would be a formidable adversary to overcome. The other princes were equally shaken, for in their eyes, King Wu of Qin was exceptionally valiant, having died beneath the weight of a cauldron he attempted to lift. That Xiang Yu could actually lift such a vessel is truly formidable. In that case, this Xiang Yu would seem to be a rare talent indeed. A talent such as this only appears once every 1,000 years in Huaxia. It would be a pity not to employ him, Qin village chief. That will not do. Xiang Yu has buried alive far too many great Qin soldiers. His crimes are simply too grave. Li Si was essentially reminding Qin Shi Huang that the enmity between Xiang Yu and Great Qin was as deep as a sea of blood. Xiang Yu could not be employed. He could only be executed. Yet Qin Shi Huang remained silent. He had already considered this matter previously. Although the slaughter of the Great Qin imperial clan was infuriating, in the context of war, the defeat and death of royalty is an unfortunate but common reality. Furthermore, Xing Yu's own kin had also been slaughtered by the Great Qin armies. Suddenly, Qin Shi Huang called out to Meng Tian, only to find him with his eyes closed, standing in absolute silence. General Meng, what are you contemplating? I was lost in thought, Your Majesty. I was reflecting upon General Bai Qi. Bai Qi was one of the 4 great generals of the Warring States period, known by the moniker the Human Butcher. He buried alive and decapitated 450,000 Zhao troops at the Battle of Changping. At the Battle of Yik, he annihilated 240,000 Han and Wei coalition forces. The number of enemy soldiers slain by Bai Qi exceeded 1 million. In later generations, it is even whispered that Bai Qi would dismiss any operation involving fewer than 500,000 men. Bai Qi would not accept it. Therefore, in Meng Tian's eyes, this matter was entirely unremarkable. One who lacks ruthlessness cannot command an army or place themselves in the shoes of another to contemplate strategy. If you were Xiang Yu, faced with 200,000 surrendered soldiers, what would you do? Sits the daily consumption of grain and fodder, not to mention the constant fear of a rebellion from within the ranks. Hearing Meng Tian speak in such a manner, Qin Shi Huang understood his reasoning clearly, yet the emperor remained displeased, striking Meng Tian sharply on the head. Speak your mind plainly. Why pretend to be so profound? You are a partial commander. Why indulge in such convoluted posturing? At that moment, Qin Shi Huang had already made his decision. Xiang Yu was a man of immense talent, and now that Qin Shi Huang possessed the potato, along with other advanced resources, the great Qin Empire would continue to expand indefinitely. Such an endeavor required formidable commanders like Xiang Yu. After all, Qin Shi Huang was a man who truly valued exceptional talent. If it were otherwise, officials like Li Si and Chen Yuye, who hailed from other states, would never have served within the great Qin. However, Qin Shi Huang was no weak-willed ruler. Should Xiang Yu adamantly refuse to serve the throne, Qin Shi Huang would harbor no mercy for him. To spare a Xiang Yu who refuses to submit is merely to nurture a future enemy. One must never leave such a hidden threat to fester. Master, tell me then, how did Xiang Yu ultimately meet his downfall? If Xiang Yu was truly so formidable, how could he have failed? Meng Tian was filled with curiosity, but the answer was simple, a topic I have touched upon before. Xiang Yu lacked the wisdom to win the hearts and minds of the people, whereas Liu Bang racked a multitude of talented individuals to his banner. Among them, the most exceptional were none other than the 3 heroes of the early Han. Following the Great Qin came the Great Han. This was the name of the dynasty established by Liu Bang. They were the ones who assisted Liu Bang in founding his empire. The men with the greatest contributions were Zhang Liang, Xiao, and Han Xin. On hearing of such talent, Qin Shi Huang immediately grew interested. If the Great Qin would fall to the Great Han in only a few years, then these men must currently be living among the common folk. I must be vigilant, locate them, and recruit these talents for myself before anyone else. Let us first speak of Zhongliang. Zhongliang, whose courtesy name was Zifang. Throughout the ages, whenever a ruler finds a brilliant strategist, they are praised with these words: "You are truly my Zifang. Either I possess this man, or it is like the Zhou dynasty securing Zhongzia, or the Han dynasty securing Zhongliang." Everyone was filled with astonishment. Possessed Zhongzia, and the Han possessed Zhongliang. This is comparing Zhongliang to the legendary Zhongzia. And who is Zhongzia? Mentioning Zhongzia might mean little to the common folk, but if one were to speak his other name, everyone would undoubtedly recognize it. Zhongzia, also known as Lu Wang, is none other than the legendary strategist. Qin Shi Huang became incredibly agitated. Regardless of the cost, this talent must belong to me. Zhang was a man of profound wisdom and strategy, capable of devising plans that secured victory from 1,000 miles away. His brilliant stratagems had saved Lu Bang from mortal peril time and again, leaving the crowd even more shaken. What level of intellect and foresight is this? They could barely grasp the lessons taught by their masters, yet this Zhang Liang could decide the outcome of battles from thousands of miles away. His prowess is peerless. Li Si was even more deeply shocked. He was the foremost capable official under Qin Shi Huang, yet even he could not claim the ability to secure victory from 1,000 miles away. Zhang Liang is truly formidable. However, there is a matter that links Zhang Liang intimately to Qin Shi Huang. What matter? Could it be that Zhang Liang once came to submit to me, and I failed to recognize his worth? If so, that would be an immense regret. Zhang Liang once attempted to assassinate Qin Shi Huang. What? He attempted to assassinate me? What do you mean he? You are not Qin Shi Huang. And Teacher Chu, what exactly happened? I have mentioned before that there were 3 primary causes for the death of Qin Shi Huang. One was the poisoning by Fusu, and another was the toll taken on his body by staying up late night after night, reviewing imperial memorials. Yet, there is a third reason which involves Zhang Liang in the 29th year of the Qin Dynasty. During the 3rd Eastern Inspection Tour, he attempted to assassinate Qin Shi Huang, and Shi Huang was stunned. It was only last month that Qin Shi Huang decided upon the timing for his 3rd Eastern Inspection Tour. Without a word to anyone else, he turned his gaze suddenly toward Li Si and Meng Tian. Both men were privy to the secret, yet Li Si and Meng Tian immediately shook their heads. They had not spoken a word of it to outsiders. And Qin Shi Huang then looked toward Fusu. Fusu was also aware of the situation, and he too hurriedly shook his head. Although he held me in great respect, he had not revealed so much as a single syllable regarding this matter. Qin Shi Huang was struck with profound astonishment, a matter known only to a few, yet I had somehow discovered the truth. While he had initially harbored doubts about my knowledge of future generations, he was now completely convinced that I truly possessed such foresight. So, what were the consequences of Zhang Liang's assassination attempt at Bolangsha? The result was that although the assassination failed, the terror of the event left Qin Shi Huang's health in a state of decline. This served as one of the 3 primary reasons behind Qin Shi Huang's eventual passing. Qin Shi Huang flew into a towering rage, demanding to know how a man of such immense talent as Zhang Liang dared to attempt his assassination. Zhang Liang deserved to die for his audacity in striking at Qin Shi Huang. Yet for a ruler as magnificent as Qin Shi Huang, one must remember that every man serves a master of his own. Zhang was a noble of the state of Han, and he remained fiercely loyal to the Han royal lineage. Even later, during the Chu-Han contention, despite the Han king being an incompetent ruler, Zhang Liang never abandoned him. It was only after the Han king passed away that Zhang Liang finally chose to pledge his allegiance to Liu Bang. Upon hearing my words, Qin Shi Huang found his appreciation for Zhang Liang growing all the more. The mistake committed by Zhang Liang was, in comparison to that of Shang Yu, somewhat easier to overlook. Zhang Liang had intended to assassinate Qin Shi Huang, a crime that should have been punished by death, but since the attempt failed, it could be forgiven. Furthermore, Zhang Liang possessed extraordinary talent. To execute him would be a true waste, much like the case of Shang Yu. If Zhang Liang were willing to submit to the Great Qin, Qin Shi Huang would certainly entrust him with great responsibility. And so, who is this Xiao He? Could it be that in a world that produced a talent like Zhang Liang, there could exist yet another? Xiao He is by no means mediocre. Many have heard of Zhang Liang in Han Xin, often mistakenly assuming Xiao He was merely filling a gap among the 3 heroes of the early Han. But in truth that is not the case. In the eyes of many, Xiao He is the true leader of the 3 heroes of the early Han, the #1 meritorious official in the founding of the Han Dynasty, personally bestowed by Liu Bang. Li Si was stunned. To have a civil official as brilliant as Zhang Liang was already enough, yet now he was told of another. May I ask, what are the achievements of this Xiao He? Xiao He was the overseer of logistics, yet his management of supply lines was anything but ordinary. While Liu Bang fought on the front lines against Shang Yu, suffering continuous defeats and losing a vast number of soldiers, Despite losing vast amounts of provisions and weaponry, Xiao He was able to continuously reinforce Liu Bang's ranks without pause. These steady supplies of provisions and arms allowed Liu Bang to maintain the capital necessary to challenge Xiang Yu. As a seasoned general who frequently led campaigns, Meng Tian understood the vital importance of such logistical prowess. In ancient warfare, victory was often a matter of national strength. Only with a stable supply line could one sustain a prolonged campaign. During his own long-distance expeditions, there were several instances where Meng Tian marched his armies, only for logistical failures to arise, forcing him to retreat despite holding the absolute advantage, leaving him with a burning desire to execute the officials responsible for logistics. But upon hearing of a logistical expert like Xiao He, Meng Tian's eyes truly ignited with interest. Even as Liu Bang suffered repeated defeats and lost hundreds of thousands of troops, Xiao He somehow managed to consistently rebuild the army for continued combat. It appears that one truly underestimated this man, Xiao He. However, if his only talent was the management of supplies, surely Zhang Liang would be capable of the same, and the great Qin's Li Si would be equally capable. Would that not mean he is not particularly extraordinary? That assessment is incorrect. If Xiao He possessed only this level of skill, Liu Bang would never have appointed him as the first chancellor of the Han Dynasty. Nor would the Han Dynasty have been able to recover and flourish with such remarkable speed. After Xiao He became chancellor, many of his policies proved to be highly effective. The chancellor is the position beneath one man but above 10,000. Aside from the emperor, the chancellor holds the highest authority. He had previously assumed that Zhang Liang was the chancellor, never imagining that Xiao He was the first to hold that title in the Han Dynasty. Does this not mean that the world now possesses two talents who rival his own capability? Qin Shi Huang looked at Li Si and let out a soft laugh. Li Si was immensely talented yet arrogant. It seems he has finally received a humbling blow. Yet, remembering the betrayal Li Si would commit in the future, Qin Shi Huang could not help but feel a lingering sense of unease. Qin Shi Huang gave a slight cough, signaling his sons with a glance to see which of them was truly quick-witted. At this moment, Qin Ziying noticed Qin Shi Huang's subtle cue. Teacher Chu, Li Si is the chancellor of Great Qin, while Xiao He is the chancellor of the Han Dynasty. Between the two, who is more formidable? Qin Shi Huang looked upon Qin Ziying with approval. His mind was indeed sharp. Intended to use the example of Xiao He to deflate Li Si's pride, so that he would understand there are always others who surpass oneself, and just as there are heavens beyond heavens, Li Si was left rendered speechless. Naturally, I understood what Qin Shi Huang was thinking, but if I were to say Li Si was inadequate, it would be quite a loss of face. Li Si and Xiao He, you say? Such a comparison is truly a difficult task. To speak of them, each possesses their own unique brilliance and distinct strengths. However, if you insist on a definitive comparison, I have pondered it seriously, while Qin Shi Huang and the others look on with smug anticipation. Li Si held his breath in anticipation. I believe the answer is Li Si. While Xiao He's administrative prowess was formidable, effectively managing the logistics for Liu Bang, he fell short of Li Si regarding the conceptualization of systemic reforms. Many of the institutions proposed by Li Si established unprecedented precedents in history. That is my reasoning. Great Qin implemented the commandery system, while Liu Bang utilized the enfeoffment system, which eventually led to the feudal kingdoms within the Han Dynasty becoming excessively powerful, becoming difficult to control. This situation is, to some extent, linked to Xiao He and his tenure as chancellor. Li Si listened intently, and upon hearing me declare him superior to Xiao He, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. By now, Xiao He will surely be discovered by Qin Shi Huang. I have come to the Great Qin court to offer my talents. If I had claimed Xiao He was superior to Li Si, Li Si's position as chancellor would undoubtedly have been forfeit. He has a prior track record. Turns out Li Si is truly this formidable. This demonstrates that there are still many talented individuals under my command. Zhang Liang and Xiao He are both civil officials. In that case, this Han Jin must be a military general, correct? Surely Liu Bang could not have established the Great Han Dynasty relying solely on 3 civil officials? N is naturally a military general. Hearing of someone who shares his own profession, Meng Tian began to feel a surge of interest. Just how formidable is this Han Jin when it comes to warfare? Does he possess the martial valor of Xiang Yu? Or perhaps he excels in strategic maneuvering. When describing Han Xin, one absolutely cannot use the term martial valor. Xiang Yu fought by inspiring his troops through personal courage, using his own morale to ignite the spirit of the entire army. Han Xin, conversely, fought by employing strategy to inspire his troops, frequently winning through unconventional tactics, defeating the many with the few, and the strong with the weak. Then this Han Xin is truly extraordinary. To achieve victory under such circumstances is no small feat. One must understand that when the enemy possesses superior numbers and equipment, they naturally hold the strategic advantage from the very beginning. If you start with such a disadvantage, what hope is there to contend with them? Yet, some are capable of overcoming the odds, defeating the many with the few, and the strong with the weak. The war god Bai Qi was one such figure who achieved this. But Does Han Xin have any notable campaigns where he triumphed while outnumbered? Indeed, that would be the Battle of Jingxing, the famous deployment with one's back to the river. At that time, Han Xin commanded only 30,000 soldiers, most of whom were poorly trained. The state of Zhao marched toward them with an army of 200,000, intent on their total annihilation. Tell me, what do you think Han Xin should have done? Meng Tian was stunned upon hearing this. 200,000 against 30,000. That is a disparity of nearly 7 to 1. One must realize that even when Bai Qi fought, he never faced such overwhelming odds while claiming victory. Had he been in that situation, even he would have had no choice but to retreat and fortify his position. Qin Shi Huang and Li Si were equally astonished. Although they were not experts in military strategy, they had witnessed countless wars throughout their lives. Even if Bai Qi were resurrected, he would have had to carefully deliberate on how to resolve such a hopeless imbalance of power. So how did Han Xin choose to fight? Did he surrender? Or did he retreat to defensive lines? Han Xin did not surrender. He led his 30,000 men and engaged the grand army of Zhao head-on. Han Xin's forces suffered an immediate setback upon impact, after which they retreated, eventually positioning themselves with their backs against the river. You are not joking, are you? Was it not said that Han Xin was a master of warfare? To set a formation with one's back to a river, is that not simply cutting off one's own path to survival? The state of Zhao thought the exact same thing. Consequently, the Zhao commander grew arrogant and looked down upon Han Xin. He believed Han Xin knew nothing of military tactics. He then ordered the Zhao army to launch an all-out assault. Yet at that moment, Han Xin spoke to his soldiers. Behind us is the river. We have nowhere to flee. Surrender means death, so we might as well fight to the last breath. Thus, every soldier unleashed their inner ferocity, fighting as if one man were worth 100, and in an instant, they shattered the Zhao vanguard. As the Zhao army attempted to press their remaining numbers, they were caught off guard by 2,000 soldiers Han Xin had secretly dispatched earlier. They had already infiltrated and seized the Zhao headquarters. Then, they planted the banners of the Han army everywhere. They shouted loudly that the Zhao army's main camp had been captured. The great Han army has arrived. Consequently, the Zhao ranks fell into total disarray. Upon hearing this, Meng Tian realized the situation, and cold sweat broke out across his entire body. It turned out that he too had underestimated Han Xin. Why would he array his troops along the riverbank? Han Xin was truly terrifying. Meng Tian was deeply shaken, as he could hardly believe Han Xin's brilliance could be applied to such a degree. One must realize that with a single wrong step, Han Xin would have been left without a burial place. If he were to engage Han Xin in battle, he feared he would truly be unable to emerge victorious. It was no wonder that Liu Bang was able to seize the world. With civil officials like Zhang Liang and Xiao He, and military generals like Han Xin, Qin Shi Huang was overjoyed. At this moment, the emperor had not yet passed away, and the world was not yet in complete chaos. Thus, these talents were individuals he absolutely had to recruit. Han Xin's battles of the weak overcoming the strong were legendary. This was not the only instance. Liu Bang, seeing that Han Xin commanded such a massive force, felt deeply uneasy in his heart. Hans originally intended to launch a campaign against the state of Qi. However, Liu Bang suddenly arrived and took away all of Han Xin's soldiers in one fell swoop. He left him with only 2,000 men, while at that time the state of Qi possessed over 70 cities. With hundreds of thousands of troops, everyone present, upon hearing this, was instantly astonished. 2,000 men against hundreds of thousands. It was impossible. How could 2,000 men possibly stand against a force numbering in the hundreds of thousands? 2,000 men fighting hundreds of thousands. It was truly inconceivable. Yet Han Xin fought, and furthermore he won. Can you guess how he managed it? How could he? Did he simply surrender and flee? Han Xin did not fear fighting battles. He only feared having no battles to fight. Han Xin directly distributed travel expenses to the 2,000 men and told them to go home. What? Did he disband them right there on the spot? Then how could there be any battle left to fight? But in the next second, my words left them all in shock. Han Xin declared, "Among these soldiers, who among you can bring back 5 men? Whoever does so will be promoted to squad leader. Whoever brings back 1,000 will be promoted to commander of 1,000. Eventually, Han succeeded in gathering the required number of soldiers. Everyone present was struck speechless, filled with immense astonishment. What kind of unorthodox tactic was this? It was even more devious than the most cunning strategies of war. Everyone stood there, stammering and unable to find the right words. Seeing them unable to utter a single syllable for half a day, I could not help but laugh. Han Xin's prowess in warfare was truly formidable, his stratagems layer upon layer, so it was only natural for those lacking such vision to be struck with fear. What an exceptional talent this man is. Qin Shi Huang, standing nearby, was particularly exhilarated. He was determined to venture out and task someone with recruiting all these talents into his service. Li Si chuckled darkly, having just conceived of an intriguing idea. Teacher Su, I must ask, between Han Xin, the renowned Qin general Meng Tian, and Xiang Yu, who is the superior military commander? Upon hearing this, Meng Tian felt as if he were being singled out for public humiliation. First and foremost, Han Nin was undoubtedly superior to Zhang Han. For in his very first campaign, Han Xin repaired the plank roads and secretly crossed Chencang, easily crushing Zhang Han's forces. This, Meng Tian was profoundly shaken. He was well aware of Zhang Han's military strength. He was a promising junior, who given a few more years of growth, might have stood on equal footing with him, yet he had been easily dismantled by Han Xin. But how does he compare to Xiang Yu? Comparing him to Xiang Yu is a rather unique case. Xiang Yu was also a legendary general, tempered by 100 battles, yet his style of warfare was highly unconventional. Xiang Yu used his own courage to inspire his army, charging at the vanguard, his martial spirit overwhelming like a surging tide. However, this style of combat is truly that of a frontline warrior. Xiang Yu lacked the capacity to command a vast army. If he were to lead several 100,000 or even 1,000,000 soldiers, the mere challenge of coordination and unified movement would be enough to give him a splitting headache. Meng Tian nodded in agreement. Coordinating a force of hundreds of thousands was indeed a gargantuan task. Looking back through the entirety of ancient Chinese history, it seems no one has ever truly commanded a 1,000,000-strong army. Yet Han Xin was different. For Han Xin, the greater the number of troops, the better. Han Xin was a man capable of commanding a 1,000,000-strong army. Even with an army of 1,000,000, Han Xin could wield them as easily as a clenched fist. During the final decisive battle against Xiang Yu, Han Xin commanded over 500,000 troops, orchestrating an ambush from all sides, using the songs of Chu to ensure his massive army exerted its full devastating potential. Thus it is said that when Han Xin and Xiang Yu clashed, the fewer the soldiers, the higher Xiang Yu's chances of victory. Yet the larger the army, the less likely Xiang Yu would be to triumph. As for Meng Tian, while he is undeniably formidable, if he were to engage Han in true combat, his chances of victory would be slim. I have reached my final decision. Beside me, Qin Shi Huang was already contemplating countless ways to recruit Han Xin. I truly desire to test my skills against his. Given his command, he must surely hail from a prestigious noble house, having studied the arts of war since his youth. Who is his master? Who could have taught him such tactics? On that, your majesty is mistaken. Han Xin was born into poverty. He taught himself through books and military strategy, harboring grand ambitions while enduring the humiliation of others. There was a time when he was forced to crawl between a man's legs, and he did so without hesitation. Li Si and Meng Tian were both astounded. They found Han Xin's resilience incomprehensible, wondering how a man could bear such disgrace when dignity is held in such high regard. Qin Shi Huang fell into a deep silence, reflecting on his own time as a hostage in the state of Zhao, recalling that the humiliations he endured were far greater than this. He found himself admiring Han Xin, especially considering the man's history of unappreciated talent. He first offered his services to Xiang Yu, yet despite repeatedly offering strategies, Xiang Yu refused to listen, granting him nothing more than the lowly post of a guard. Afterward, he defected to Liu Bang. Liu Bang assigned him to manage logistics, leading Han Xin to eventually flee in frustration. It was only when Xiao He discovered Han Xin's true genius that he brought him back and vehemently urged Liu Bang to appoint him as the Grand General, paving the way for the rise of the great Han Dynasty, and earning him the title of peerless national hero from Liu Bang. Future generations would eventually revere Han Xin as the god of war. Not bad, I like this Han Xin, I have decided to recruit him. If you still insist on recruiting him, save your gold for the sake of your own sanity. Purchasing a fine weapon would suit Han Xin far better than your delusions. Very well, let us conclude today's lesson here. The session had been long and exhausting, but Qin Shi Huang had gained a wealth of insight. After the lecture ended, Qin Shi Huang departed, turning to instruct Li Si. Summon Zhang Han and Wang Jian to my presence at once. Xingshul Bong Zhangyang Xiaohe and Han Xin. Not a single one of them shall escape. I shall use them to expand the borders of the great Qin Empire. Meanwhile, the voice of the system resonated once more. Congratulations, the student's knowledge has been elevated. Reward, 500 sweet potato seeds and 500 chili pepper seeds. I was overcome with joy. Sweet potatoes are truly a magnificent crop. Their yield is in no way inferior to potatoes. Under optimal cultivation conditions, the yield can reach as high as 6,000 caddies. Furthermore, sweet potatoes are incredibly versatile in the kitchen. More importantly, every part of the plant, from the tubers to the vines and leaves, is delicious. I used to enjoy stir-fried sweet potato vines with meat. I would not trade that dish even for water spinach stir-fried with meat. Simultaneously, my attention turned to the chili peppers. These were an even greater treasure. Chili peppers are an essential spice for stir-frying and seasoning. I am quite fond of spicy food. It is an ingredient I simply cannot do without. My heart swelled with excitement. This small village is truly lacking. It has almost nothing to offer. But now, with these additions to the vegetables I obtained earlier, my meals will be far more abundant. Just imagining the harvest brings me immense satisfaction. Yet the system's voice had not concluded. It seemed there were further rewards. Congratulations, student Qin Yang has achieved an intellectual breakthrough. Reward, +10 base attribute points to physical constitution, specifically strength and speed. As the words faded, I felt a surge of raw power coursing through my entire body. My physique felt transformed, my steps light and agile, as if I could take flight with the slightest exertion. Deep in thought, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself in the room. Teacher Su, what are you so happy about? I was taken aback. I could not explain my sudden increase in strength, but I would need help planting the sweet potatoes and chili peppers. Qin Yang, go call a few of your fellow students to assist me in planting these. Are these two items truly so remarkable? They are naturally remarkable. This is a sweet potato. Similar to a potato, you simply cut it into pieces and plant them. However, the yield is far superior to that of a potato, potentially reaching 6,000 caddies. Furthermore, there are countless ways to prepare them. Qin Yang was left speechless, utterly stunned. Comparable to a potato, yet with a yield of 6,000 caddies per mu, and even the vines and leaves are edible. Is this another divine grain? These chili peppers are equally extraordinary. These are the red peppers among the various chili varieties. Typically, each acre can yield approximately 2,000 caddies. They are used as a seasoning to enhance spiciness, yet they are entirely edible. Even the leaves can be stir-fried and consumed. Qin Ziying remained in a state of shock. He could accept sweet potatoes, as they were a staple food. But how could even a mere spice yield such an immense harvest per acre? With 2,000 caddies per acre, every person in Great Qin could use chili in their meals. One could practically survive on chili alone. I am unaware of what occupies Qin Ziying's thoughts. If I knew that Qin Ziying intended for all of Great Qin to consume chili, I would certainly ask him if he truly fears not the wrath of the entire Great Qin populace descending upon him. Once I handed the items over to Ziying, I concerned myself no further. Lying upon my bed, a wave of sorrow began to wash over me. In truth, I have begun to grow homesick. I miss home dearly. My attentive princesses back in my homeland, are they faring well? At this moment, Qin Ziying was preparing to head out to find someone when he suddenly heard my internal monologue. He was struck by a realization. So Master Chu wishes to marry a princess. The emperor has waited long, and he does not know how to repay the master. He must report this to his majesty immediately. Elsewhere within the Xianyang Palace, Qin Shi Huang stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Before him stood three generals, Meng Tian, Wang Yi, and Zhang Han. He was issuing his imperial commands. Meng Tian, I command you to lead an army of 100,000 to the Xiaye prefecture to capture Xiangyu. Is there any difficulty in this? This general obeys the command. Meng Tian, aware of history, agreed without a moment's hesitation. Xiangyu, the man who had defeated the Qin forces, could by no means be overlooked. However, Wang Yi and Zhang Han were left completely bewildered. Must one really mobilize an army of 100,000 to capture a single man? Yet, in the following instant they were struck with even greater shock. Wang Yi, I command you to lead an army of 100,000 to Zhongyangli in Pei County, and capture a village head named Liu Ji. There must be no errors. Wang Yi was stunned. An army of 100,000 was sufficient to engage the Xiongnu in battle, yet the emperor commanded him to go to Zhongyangli to capture a mere village head. However, he could not defy an Zhang Han, your mission carries great weight. Lead an army of 100,000. Travel to Bolangsha to recruit a man named Zhang Liang, then proceed to Huayin County to summon Han Xin, and finally to Pei County to find Xiaowa. Zhan was momentarily stunned. Who were these three men? He had never heard of them in his life. Must he mobilize an army of 100,000 along with all their horses and provisions, merely to invite these three individuals? Seeing the bewilderment on the faces of his two generals, Qin Shi Huang merely chuckled. They possessed no knowledge of the history yet to come. What was an army of 100,000 in the grand scheme of things? The combined talents of these men were worth far more than millions of soldiers. Qin Shi Huang looked forward to these meetings with great anticipation. Just as Meng Tian and Zhang Han took their leave, Qin Ziying arrived. Upon seeing Ziying, a look of genuine delight crossed the face of Qin Shi Huang. Ziying was a member of the royal bloodline who would ultimately sacrifice his life for the great Qin. Furthermore, through long observation, Qin Shi Huang had realized that Qin Ziying was truly gifted and remarkably intelligent. With each passing day, Qin Shi Huang grew fonder of him. Your Majesty, when I visited Master Chu, he mentioned that he had acquired new crops, sweet potatoes and chili peppers. What are the yields for these sweet potatoes and chilies? Sweet potatoes can serve as a primary food source. The yield per mu can reach as high as 6,000 jin. They can be eaten raw, and even the leaves and vines are edible. Chili peppers are a spice. The yield per mu can reach 2,000 jin. They can dispel dampness, and even the chili leaves can be stir-fried into a meal. And as I said, the leaves themselves are quite palatable. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi Huang was utterly astonished. Ever since he had encountered this mysterious figure, he had been met with one miracle after another. 6,000 jin for sweet potatoes. Was that not even higher than the yield of potatoes? Furthermore, to be edible raw, was this not a treasure in every sense? As for the chili peppers, a mere spice ice that could produce 2,000 jin per mu, with edible leaves to boot, and more importantly, the ability to dispel dampness. One must remember that the first emperor had plans to campaign against the Bayou. It was said that the Bayou lands were plagued by heavy dampness. Would the chili pepper not arrive at the perfect moment? Your Majesty, this is a blessing for the great Qin. With such divine items at our disposal, there is no doubt that our empire shall grow even more prosperous. However, Your Majesty, there is a complication. It seems Master Chu's state of mind has become troubled. Hearing the words of Qin Xing, the expression on Qin Shi Huang's face shifted instantly from joy to grave concern. I absolutely cannot have any issues. If I were to fall, then everything Qin Shi Huang has built would crumble. Master Chu, what is the matter? Has he encountered some complication? Qin Xing grew tense. He wanted to say that he missed the princess. To pine for the emperor's daughter is a crime of high treason. What, in the end, is going on? Master Chu replied that he missed the princess deeply, missed her more than words could convey. I thought it was something serious. It turns out this was my oversight. I shall resolve this matter with all haste. Yet, I never imagined that while Master Chu stood at the lectern teaching with such fervor, in the depths of his heart, he was longing for the princess within the Xianyang palace. The echoes of raucous laughter grew louder, and the sounds of carnage intensified. A young man of roughly 18, possessing a remarkably robust physique, drew a ragged breath. Before him lay more than 100 Qin soldiers, groaning in agony. Their faces were swollen, and some had suffered broken limbs, writhing in sheer misery. The young man felt deeply perplexed. He had only been lifting a massive cauldron when these 100-odd Qin soldiers swarmed him, intent on capture. He felt a surge of anxiety. Had his true identity been exposed? The Qin soldiers sprawled on the ground, had been ordered to test the true extent of this youth's strength. They had assumed that 100 men would be more than enough to subdue him, yet they had been dismantled with contemptuous ease. At this moment, Meng Tian stepped forward, clapping his hands. It seems you are indeed Xiang Yu, without a doubt. Your strength is truly formidable. To single-handedly defeat so many of my men is no small feat. Meng Tian's assessment was correct. The man before him, who had bested 100 elite Qin soldiers, was none other than the future hegemon king of Western Chu. Xiang Yu, do you intend to cross blades with me? Xiang Yu did not recognize Meng Tian and assumed he had come to challenge him. You pride yourself on your combat prowess? What use is a mere talent for brawling? To navigate the world, one must possess true power and a formidable backing. Whose faction do you represent? My name is Xiang Ji. If that does not suit you, calling me Big Brother will suffice. You are arrogant. Can you defeat me then? A duel, you say? Very well. Immediately, Meng Tian clapped his hands. At once, outside the city of Xiaye, a vast, dense sea of the Qin army surged forward. Xiang Yu was so stunned he could not utter a word. There were at least 100,000 soldiers. No matter how peerless his martial might, he could not hope to prevail against 10,000, let alone 100,000. You still wish to fight? To ensure no one can say I bullied you, I shall grant you a fair choice. You may choose to face my 100,000 men alone, or choose to have 100,000 men fight against you alone. Yu was left speechless. This great Qin general was truly shameless. I have no desire to argue with you. Do you really think I don't know you are Xiang Yu? Where is everyone? Smash his cauldron and take the man away. Elsewhere, in Zhongyangli of Pei County, a man nearing 30 years of age walked into a tavern with a carefree and nonchalant air. He was none other than Liu Bang. The owner laughed at the sight, having already eaten without even asking for the price. I have never paid for a meal in this city. Why should I ask for the price of a few pieces of your meat? That depends on whose meat it is. Who is selling here, anyway? And what do you think you are? The owner said nothing, his eyes glinting with a fierce, murderous intent. Liu Bang was stunned. This man had clearly served in the military. He dropped the dog meat and prepared to flee. But in the next moment, dust filled the air. Countless Qin soldiers surged forth from the crossroads. They flooded the area, pointing their weapons directly at Liu Bang. Liu Bang was petrified. Are they really sending an entire army to kill me over some unpaid meat? At this moment, Wang emerged from the ranks of the soldiers. With one hand, he snatched the dog leg from Liu Bang's grip. He took a large bite and commanded, "Take him away." Shortly after, several Qin soldiers escorted Liu Bang away. Liu Bang felt a bitterness he could not put into words. For the sake of one unpaid meal of dog meat, 100,000 men were sent to capture him. At the same time, in Huayin County, a crowd gathered on the street to watch a commotion. Amidst the clamor and jeers, a man was seen lying prone on the ground. He intended to crawl between the legs of another. This man was Han Xin, who was being harassed by a local thug but dared not retaliate. The thug demanded he crawl through his legs, and he actually intended to comply. Han Xin, what is the point of carrying that sword? You never dare to draw it, only pretending all day long. You will never amount to anything in this life. Crawling through my legs is all you are fit for. Yet Han Xin remained silent, his expression somber as he continued to crawl forward. At that very moment, a thunderous roar erupted, causing the earth to tremble as countless soldiers in jet-black armor surged forward, blotting out the sky and covering the land. Their discipline was absolute, and their murderous intent was so overwhelming, it seemed as though they intended to slaughter everything in their path. Upon witnessing this, the crowd was struck with absolute terror. This was the Great Qin army. Why had they arrived here? With such a massive force, there must have been at least 100,000 soldiers. The spectators were so paralyzed by fear that they stood rooted to the spot. At this moment, Zhang Han, clad in iron armor and wielding a sharp blade, stepped forward. He cast a glance at Han Xin, who lay prone on the ground, and at the arrogant hoodlum nearby. With an icy expression, he stepped forward and delivered a single, decisive strike. The hoodlum let out a shriek of sheer horror, clamping his legs together as he rolled on the ground. Why are you screaming? You oppressed others. Did you never consider that this day might come? With some treatment, you may still be able to serve in the Great Qin Palace. If Zhao Gao is in need of talents like you, who would ever dare to force another to crawl between their legs in the future? Among the 100,000 soldiers under my command, if each of them were to take a strike, the other hoodlums were terrified, their faces turning deathly pale. They retreated step by step, a chill creeping up their spines. Is this Zhang Han a devil? We shall never dare to act this way again. Han Xin was even more shaken. I had already prepared myself to crawl through, and yet you have cut that possibility away. Is this the first time in history that a fate has been so abruptly severed? Zhang Han did not waste words with Han Xin. He immediately ordered his soldiers to bring forth a large carriage, invited Han Xin to board, and then withdrew his troops. He had to hasten to a location known as Balangsha. At this moment, a man named Zhang Liang was still lying in wait among the bushes there, the imperial gardens of Xianyang. It was another new day, and I stood at the podium, preparing to begin the lecture. The princes in the classroom were already seated, ready to listen to my teachings. During every lesson, they listened with intense focus and took notes with the utmost seriousness, terrified of missing even the smallest detail. At this time, Qin Shi Huang, having finished the morning court session, arrived. Village Chief Qin, you have come to attend the lecture again. Teachers, this time I have brought you a few new students. Immediately afterward, a man stepped inside. It was Hu Hai, who had been disciplined for several days and was finally released. Master Su, but as soon as Qin Shi Huang saw Hu Hai, he felt nothing but annoyance. With a single kick, he forced Hu Hai to his knees. Who would dare stand while speaking to their teacher? Stay there on your knees and listen to the lecture. Hu Hai remained speechless. While Fu Su and the others were seated, he dared not voice a single word of protest. Do not be like that, let him take a seat. I am also quite curious. Why do you all hold such deep resentment toward this Qin Xuan? Now sit down. If I catch you pulling any more tricks, I will break both of your legs. Hu scrambled to his seat in a panic, settling down even more rigidly than a prisoner at his final meal. Master Su, I have brought one more student. I was delighted. Another student, another opportunity to receive rewards, did it not? Greetings, teacher. She is a young girl. This is my daughter. Would it be acceptable for Qin Man to join the class? Qin Shi Huang smiled. In truth, this was indeed his own daughter. Princess Zuman was his most beloved child, yet she had not come here merely to study. In this ancient era, even a princess held a significantly lower status compared to a prince. While princesses might be taught to read, it was generally unheard of for them to attend an official academy. Shi Huang was naturally well aware of this, and thus he assumed I would hold the same views. Therefore, his true intention in bringing Princess Zuman was to establish a personal connection with me. Qin Shi Huang had initially expected me to refuse, but seeing my expression of surprise, he immediately assumed the matter was settled. Yet, how could I have possibly known about these intricate social nuances? Had I never encountered a female student before? It was simply that since arriving in this village months ago, I had not seen a single woman. Today was the first time I had witnessed one, hence my genuine surprise. Since man has arrived, she may take her seat. Master Su, can women truly attend the academy? Have you not all read the works of Confucius extensively? Are you unfamiliar with the concept of education without discrimination? Naturally, women are permitted to learn, and Shi Huang remained silent, though his shock only deepened. Does education without discrimination truly extend to include women? Your Majesty, perhaps Master Su has his own preferences. Let us not dampen his spirit. Qin Shi Huang suddenly came to his senses, shocked that while I appeared upright and dignified on the podium, I harbored such unconventional tastes in private. Qin Shi Huang let out a hearty laugh. Today we shall continue with the material we discussed previously. The dynasty established by Liu Bang is known as the Han Dynasty. After founding the Han, he believed that the Great Qin's failure stemmed from its commandery system, which denied land grants to those who had contributed to his victory. Thus, while Liu Bang nominally maintained the commandery system, he simultaneously implemented the enfeoffment system, granting vast swathes of territory to his meritorious subjects, allowing them to govern the provinces autonomously. What is this foolishness? The commandery system which I labored so tirelessly to establish has been compromised by your enfeoffment system. It was one thing to overthrow the Great Qin, but to drag history backward in such a manner is unforgivable. Father, perhaps Liu Bang's enfeoffment system is more progressive than the commandery system. You are mistaken. The commandery system is the foundation that all future generations will follow. It is vastly superior to the enfeoffment system. Furthermore, history has already proven that as soon as Liu Bang's enfeoffment system was enacted, great chaos ensued. Even before Liu Bang had passed, those meritorious vassals had already begun to rebel. Take Peng Yue and Yingbu, for example. In the end, while Liu Bang was suppressing the rebellion of Yingbu, he was struck in the chest by an arrow fired by Yingbu, which caused his old wounds to fester, leading to his death not long after. Fusu, do you see now? Qin Shi Huang glared at Fusu for daring to suggest that the enfeoffment system was superior to the commandery system. That enfeoffment system merely divided the land among those powerful vassals. They were granted the authority to mint their own currency, appoint or dismiss officials, train their own troops, and collect land taxes. Would that not plunge the realm into the same chaos that destroyed the Zhou dynasty? It is clear that Liu Bang lacked true foresight. Moreover, the vassals Liu Bang enfeoffed were all seasoned warriors, experts in the art of war. If Liu Bang had slaughtered them all, who would remain to defend the realm should war break out? Old Li, your assessment strikes at the very heart of the matter. After Liu Bang founded his nation, he purged many of his meritorious officials. Han Xin was executed, Zhang Liang vanished into obscurity, and both Peng Yue and Yingbu eventually met their ends. At that time, the Xiongnu, having been defeated by the Qin forces, had spent decades recovering, eventually giving rise to a powerful leader known as Modu Chanyu. He unified all the tribes of the steppes, commanding hundreds of thousands of horse archers, a force of terrifying prowess. The Xiongnu then began their southward campaigns, looting and pillaging with reckless abandon. They slaughtered the common people of the Central Plains. As I speak of this, my fists are already clenched in anger. The Xiongnu have always been. Qin Shi Huang's face was filled with fury. In the future, he intended to dispatch Meng Tian to assault the Xiongnu, and subsequently construct the Great Wall, all to keep this nomadic threat at bay. Little did he expect that after only a few decades of development, the Xiongnu would boast an army of hundreds of thousands, consisting entirely of cavalry. Cavalry was, without question, a terrifying force of slaughter on the battlefield. While the Great Qin possessed an army of 1 million, the cavalry numbered only in the tens of thousands, and their mounts were far less robust than those of the Xiongnu. Yet, should the Xiongnu invade the Central Plains, no matter the difficulty, they must be resisted. This was the indomitable spirit of the Great Qin. So what course of action did Liu Bang take? Naturally, Liu Bang engaged the Xiongnu in battle. At that time, Liu Bang immediately mobilized an army of 300,000, personally leading the campaign to strike at the Xiongnu, yet his forces were comprised entirely of infantry. Nevertheless, in the early stages, Liu Bang secured several consecutive victories. Intoxicated by this success, he lost all sense of caution. Without a second thought, he led his army in a reckless pursuit. The result was being besieged at Beidang Mountain. Qin Shi Huang looked on with such frustration that he wished he could forge iron into steel. Liu Bang's system of feudal enfeoffment ruined many lives, not only destabilizing his rule but also inciting his own meritorious subjects to revolt. In the end, there were not even enough men left to face the Xiongnu. So was Liu Bang ultimately slain by the Xiongnu? He was not. The army Liu Bang commanded was a battle-hardened force. Despite being trapped at Beidang Mountain, the Xiongnu were unable to break through their lines. However, Liu Bang's supplies could not sustain them for much longer. Consequently, Liu Bang used heavy bribes to win over the wife of Modu Chanyu and established communication with the Xiongnu leader. The siege was eventually lifted, but the Han Dynasty was forced to provide a vast amount of tribute to the Xiongnu every single year. What a disgrace. Was he unable to defeat the Xiongnu, but he was reduced to offering them gifts? Was this not simply emboldening the enemy to grow even stronger? How was such cowardly behavior any different from that of the Warring States period? Where were the nations that ceded territory in exchange for peace? During the Warring States period, the national strength of Great Qin was unparalleled. Thus, many nations, seeking to avoid the calamities of war, ceded their lands to the Great Qin. Qin Shi Huang accepted their lands with satisfaction, yet he held the utmost contempt for such rulers. They were truly incompetent monarchs. Their ancestors had so much blood to secure this territory. How could one hand it over to others so easily? In what way did Liu Bang's act of offering tribute differ from those foolish and incapable tyrants? Every inch of land is an inch of blood. But what infuriated Qin Shi Huang even more was that Liu Bang did not merely offer material goods, he even surrendered a princess. When the emperor of Great Qin forced the women of foreign lands to marry into his court, it was a cause for pride. But for the women of Great Qin to be forced into marriage by a foreign power, that was an unbearable humiliation. And detestable, but the Xiongnu are even more so. The Han Dynasty had only just begun to flourish, had it not? Modu Chanyu, you may have defeated the Han, but you will certainly not be able to withstand the sharpness of my blade. Before long, the time for the lecture to end arrived. Once I finished speaking, I dismissed the class and left the room to rest. But Qin Shi Huang also prepared to depart. At this moment, he had many pressing matters to attend to. The information I had imparted to him was truly overwhelming and left him deeply shaken. However, Qin Shi Huang noticed that Princess Zuman was still sitting at her desk, lost in thought. Imperial Father, I was merely distracted for a moment. In truth, Zuman was not distracted. She had been captivated by my handsome and elegant appearance, as well as my free-spirited nature and humorous style of lecturing. As the most cherished princess of Qin Shi Huang, he had previously found several tutors for her, but those masters were far too archaic. The knowledge they taught all day held no significance whatsoever, and they were incredibly rigid. None could compare to my own wit and humor. But what kind of man is Qin Shi Huang? He naturally perceived the small thoughts of Zuman. Master Chu truly possesses a unique charm. Stay here and play for a while. You may stay as long as you wish. There is no need to return today. Zuman was stunned. What has come over the Emperor? On the other side in my quarters, I lay on the bed to rest. What kind of wretched place is this? It is stiflingly hot. Why is there not even electricity? Had there been power, I would have purchased an electric fan long ago. Suddenly, the voice of Zuman drifted in from nearby. I was taken aback. What kind of trick is this? Why is there a girl here? Is that Zuman? You cannot bully me. Is this blind person? Me? Master, I did not do it intentionally. Why have you come here? Was the lecture not already over? Upon hearing my question, Zhu Man began to blush. When Qin Shi Huang arrived, he had instructed Zhu Man to maintain a good relationship with me. This person is the immortal master. Zhu Man had already prepared herself mentally. She had assumed that an immortal master would at least be a centenarian. She had no way to refuse. Yet who could have expected that when she met me, I would be a handsome young man of about 20 years. I only wished to come and visit Master Chu. Living in the palace is far too dull. Upon hearing this, I was rendered speechless. Yet another person suffering from delusions of grandeur. Do you live in the Shanyang Palace? And are you a princess? With dozens of servants attending to your every whim daily? That is correct, immortal master. You are truly formidable. How did you know? Not only that, but I also know that you are not just Qin Man, but the daughter most favored by Qin Shi Huang. Princess Zhu Man, Immortal Master Chu is truly remarkable. He knows everything. Immortal Master Chu, is there anything else you know? I also know that renting a set of Hanfu costs several dozen yuan, and hiring an actor costs over 100. Could you all please stop this performance? With a face full of weariness, I rolled over and lay on the bed. Zheng was living a perfectly fine life in the modern era, yet she insisted on staging this ancient charade. Seeing that I was in a foul mood, Zhu Man did not dare to say another word, though the sound of a hungry stomach soon echoed through the room. Are you hungry? Very well, I will go prepare a meal. Master, what shall we eat today? We shall eat something you have surely never tasted before. Let us have hot pot. Meanwhile, inside the great hall of the Xianyang Palace, Qin Shi Huang had not yet returned. However, 5 chairs had been placed in the hall, occupied by 5 individuals of large and muscular build, yet they were all bound by iron chains. One advanced in years possessed a crafty demeanor. Another, with a long sword strapped to his back, wore an expression of complete indifference. A third viewed without a hint of fear. One man was left at a loss as to what to do, slightly tense. They were none other than Xiang Yu, Lubang, Hanshin, Zhongliang, and Xiao He. Surrounding the grand hall stood 2 soldiers guarding the entrance, clutching sharp blades. Who are all of you? Why have you been brought here? Lubang truly lived up to his reputation for thick-skinned audacity. In any situation, he remained entirely unfazed. Among these men, he only recognized Xiao He. Lord Xiao, why have you been captured and brought here as well? Could it be for dining without paying for your meat? Who would be like you, the one who skips out on debts every single day? You ugly wretch, open your eyes and look clearly. This is the Imperial Palace, the seat of His Majesty the Emperor. How could anyone be arrested and brought here merely for failing to pay for a meal? There must be a more significant reason. Then tell me, everyone. What crimes have you actually committed? I am but a humble district head. Because I failed to pay for my meat, over 10,000 people hunted me down and even smashed my bowl. I am merely a minor official. They enticed and deceived me to bring me here, promising that I would one day become the Prime Minister. I only wished to lift a cauldron. 10,000 men captured me, shattered my cauldron, and bound me with iron chains. I only wanted to squat in the bushes. They razed the entire field just to drag me out. My only desire was to crawl between another man's legs. Those 10,000 men cut away the other man's crotch, and further declared that if such a thing were to happen again, each of the 10,000 men would take a cut. Hearing this, the 4 men present cast looks of utter contempt toward Han Xin, with some even shifting their positions to distance themselves from him. A true gentleman, born between heaven and earth. How could one suffer such humiliation beneath the legs of another? All dignity of a man has been utterly discarded. Yet, just as everyone in the Xianyang Palace was busy mocking and ridiculing him, At the northern border of the Great Qin, a small village was being transformed into a living hell. Meanwhile, news from the north had yet to arrive. The Xianyang Palace remained in a state of tranquility. Not long after, the first emperor arrived. Liu Bang and the others saw this and hurriedly knelt. As Qin Shi Huang stepped inside and observed their demeanor, he offered a faint smile. The individuals who would eventually reshape the heavens and the earth were now firmly within his grasp. Xiang Yu, Liu Bang, Hanshin Zhangliang Xiao. Against whom should he move first? Xiang Yu, your name is Xiang Yu, is it not? Who is Xiang Yu? My name is Xiang Ji. At this time, Xiang Yu was only 18 years old, at the height of his passionate youth. Yet he understood that sometimes one must be subtle. What is the use of pretense? Do you truly believe that I would have you brought here without a thorough investigation? Realizing that deception was no longer an option, Xiang Yu ceased his ruse. Qin Shi Huang, you destroyed my state of Chu and slaughtered my Xiang clansmen. There can be no coexistence between you and me. As he spoke, Xiang Yu erupted into a fit of rage, attempting to shatter his shackles, but they were far too sturdy to be broken. He rose to his feet and lunged toward the first emperor. Instantly, 2 Qin soldiers rushed forward to pin Xiang Yu to the ground. Yet Xiang Yu's strength was truly immense. Even 20 elite Qin soldiers carefully selected could not hold him down. They stumbled and faltered, and some were even sent flying by Xiang Yu's sheer force. Liu Bang and the others stood in astonishment. What manner of fierce warrior was this? Shortly thereafter, over 50 Qin palace guards stormed in, fiercely pinning Xiang Yu down. Regardless of the extent of Xiang Yu's strength, now that over 70 elite soldiers were exerting their combined force, they finally restrained him. No matter how powerful he was, he could no longer stand. Good. Not bad at all. After that, he spoke, gaining a clearer understanding of Xiang Yu. He was truly overbearing, yet he was also destined to be subdued. Qin Shi Huang did not address him first, but instead turned his gaze toward Xiao He. Xiao He, there is no need for such restraint. Others may not know of your capabilities, but I do. Xiao, I appoint you as the Minister of Guests. Assuming the office on that very day, upon hearing the words of the first emperor, everyone was astonished, for the Minister of Guests was one of the 3 counselors and 9 ministers, a position of noble status among the 9 ministers, to be promoted to such a high rank upon his very arrival. Was he a prodigy? Liu Bang did not fully grasp the magnitude of the Minister of Guests, but Zhang Liang and Han Xin both stared at Xiao He in shock. This man appears entirely unremarkable. How could he be so deeply valued by the first emperor? Xiao He was also struck with disbelief. Having served as an official of the Great Qin, he understood the stature of the Minister of Guests better than anyone, knowing it was indeed one of the 9 ministers. Do I truly possess such great ability? Are you worried that you might not perform well as the Minister of Guests? If so, that is of no concern. If the post of Minister of Guests does not suit you, you may serve as the Chancellor instead. Xiao He rose directly from his seat. If being the Minister of Guests was not enough, he could simply become the Chancellor. Xiao He's state of mind was so overwhelmed with shock that he knew not what to do. Li Si, meanwhile, was filled with profound agitation. The Chancellor had already made his promises, yet was this not a sign that he could be replaced at any moment? Your Majesty, are you ultimately warning me, forcing me to compete with Xiao He? This was not entirely a bad thing. Your Majesty, please bestow a reward upon me. A reward for you? How about I reward you with death?